Kia ora tātou, nā mai haere mai, and welcome back to our council meeting here for today, Wednesday the 22nd of April 2026. Now we move from our second hearing session into the council items that were adjourned from the 25th of March. Seems like a long time ago now, but we have a number of items there that need to be addressed. So I'll go to number 8 on your papers, and it was on the 25th of March's agenda, page 137, and I'll ask Peter Ridge to come up, and this is around the strategy and policy work program for Council 26/27.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you for the opportunity to present this report to you. I won't go into a huge amount of detail. Suffice to say, this report came out after a February workshop where it was requested for some more detail on the work program of the strategy and policy team. So what this report does, it sets out the work that's currently in progress, the work that we have scheduled for the remainder of this calendar year, and the work that we have programmed for the next calendar year. We've also set out a little bit of information around the criteria we use to prioritise our work. Primarily, it is around statutory requirements for reviews of policies and bylaws, but also includes the scope, significance and impact of known issues that arise through policy reviews, and the relationship and dependence on other work. So a number of the things that we may be reviewing have relationships with other pieces of work, and if they are subject to a particular time frame, then we may look to prioritise that work higher. So some examples are the gambling venues policies. These are legally required to be reviewed every 3 years. That was last reviewed in 2023, which means the next review starts later this year. The significance and engagement policy is another example. We have reviewed that fairly recently, but we are required under the new water reforms to make some changes, which will need to be completed in the next 12 months. So that affords it a certain priority. So we use these criteria to determine which projects should be prioritised higher. As you can see from the appendix, there isn't a huge amount of scope that we can see to adjust some of those priorities. There is some scope, but not a huge amount, given that many of those projects are driven by a statutory timeframe or relationship to other work which is currently ongoing. And I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Peter. Number of questions. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Peter. I've got a few questions. The first one is, if we were to consider that we wanted to prioritise some of the policy work that was scheduled for a lot later on, what's the process for doing that?
I guess what we'd be looking for is a clear direction from elected members, and that could be a
recommendation or something. Yeah. Okay. Would we need to ask for the implications of it first, if you know what I mean? Because I wouldn't want to put up a recommendation and then you come back to me in 2 months' time and say, oh, you know, the implications of this, Councillor Johnson, have just, you know, destroyed 6 months' work on something else.
My advice would be yes. I think taking into account those implications before making that decision would be advisable.
Okay. Looking at some of the policy reviews that are in progress, that are low priority, if we were to want to prioritise something else, and the work on those had to be stopped in order to prioritise the other thing, would that work be lost or wasted in any way, or could it be picked up again later?
It will depend on the project, but in some cases, or probably most cases, the project work wouldn't be lost.
Would or wouldn't, sorry?
it wouldn't be lost.
Right, okay.
When I look through the work that's currently in progress, some of them are coming to you very soon. The policy and use of public spaces, for instance, that's well advanced and I think it's coming through in May. The naming policies work, that is also coming through very soon. Both of those, if they were to be paused, we could pick that work up again later on. But there's a lot of work has already gone into consultation, engagement, I should say, early engagement to get those projects ready. So we may want to, if we bring those back at a later date, have to redo some of that work if we feel that it's taken quite a long time.
Okay. So it's a bit hard to do this on the fly, but if we were wanting to prioritise the local alcohol policy to be done sooner, is there another policy that we could swap for that, if you see what I mean, to without significant consequences? I'm looking for that kind of direction, I suppose.
I guess there's another complexity which I haven't really covered in the report, which is that the staff resources aren't necessarily interchangeable. So, for instance, the naming policies work is being carried out by Susanna Figlioli, who is very new to our team, and she wouldn't necessarily be the most appropriate person to undertake the local alcohol policy work. So if we were to pause that project, that would free up her time, but that may not be the most appropriate resource to apply to the local alcohol policy work.
Okay.
So it's actually more moving within the team, and that's why it's a little hard to say that you can simply stop one or pause one and restart another project.
Okay, I understand that. What do you have any advice on how the local alcohol policy could be prioritised, given the work that you presented there, and given the complexities that you've just noted?
There's two parts, I think, to answer that question. One part is, and again, it's not a point that I've highlighted in my report, is the total capacity of the strategy and policy team. So since July last year, we've been operating with 4 staff out of a team of 5. So we are already, what might I say, under-resourced for the scale of work. But we're trying to manage that within our current resourcing. So in many ways, the work that we might prioritise higher, like the local alcohol policy, is work that in my prior role I probably would have undertaken. I've now moved into the manager role, and if we were to prioritise that higher, it might be a piece of work that I could take on. However, the work that might have been carried out by me would then have to be deprioritised. And one example there is the speed management plan stage 2. Why that becomes a little more complex as well is that we haven't determined exactly who in our group would be completing that work. So I can see there's a bit of confusion there, and I do understand it's never going to be as straightforward as moving things around on a chessboard. There's going to be a little bit of give and take. Yeah.
Okay, I understand what you're saying about that. I'm just wondering how I can test whether there's appetite for prioritising the local alcohol policy without, I guess, putting the staff programme in a difficult kind of situation by saying, swap this for that. So would it be sufficient for council to direct a greater prioritisation to the local alcohol policy without specifying what other policy might need to be decelerated and let the team work it out? Would that work?
Sorry, I'll just get the CEO to speak.
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor, eternally, I do understand the resource implications within Peter's team and what he's grappling with as well. What you just need to do is you tell us what you want to do in terms of a priority. We'll work out how it is that we make it happen. internally in that as well, and it might mean that we have to think about resources and whether we do need to bring somebody else in or those sorts of things as well. Just tell us which ones it is that you want us to do first, and then we'll look to make it happen.
Okay, so you don't need us to identify ones that could be slowed down, is that what you're saying?
No, that would then be necessarily. I mean, if you, and we're just talking generally now about the local alcohol policy. If you're saying to us that you're wanting that to be number 1 or 2 in that sort of order, and that, what we'll do is that we'll go away and work out how it is that we make that happen. There will be some implications from that. But we'll just have to go through and actually work out what that actually looks like. It's just this paper is just about, you know, the work program we have in front of us. If you want us to see us actually fast tracking something a little bit more, we'll work out internally. So through Peter and David, in particular, about how it is that we look to make that happen, and whether we have to bring in some externals to help or whatever that might look like to make sure that we get the order right.
Okay, thank you for that. Just in terms of the reduced resourcing of the team, is there a role being recruited, or is that a permanent reduction in resourcing?
I'm wondering if maybe David's probably the better person to answer that one.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Look, SLT are having to make a series of tough decisions regarding resourcing to stay within the remuneration budget that's allocated for this year. At this stage, the senior policy analyst within the strategy and policy team isn't being actively recruited because of some of those tough decisions we need to make. I think just to the earlier question too, I'd just reiterate what the Chief Executive has said. And one of the things we would do if you wanted to prioritise one thing is I think the initial priority for slowing things down would be the things that aren't required by law. So for instance, the naming policy, the use of public space policy. So those ones that aren't, they'd be the ones we'd look to first to slow down.
Thank you. I'll just signal that I'll just write up a recommendation to test for prioritising the local alcohol policy. Thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. A couple of questions. Just first, I didn't see anything in here about any of the governance policies, like the elected member expense policy and that kind of thing.
Yes, those aren't policies that the strategy and policy team are responsible for.
Okay, so are there other... so if this only encapsulates some of our policies, what is excluded from the scope of this report then?
So governance level policies, which the governance team will take the lead for. The organisational policies relating to people management. The policies that the strategy and policy team are responsible for are primarily those that have an external face. So those which are statutorily required by the council, such as gambling venues, where we're required to take a position on those matters. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And just looking at a couple of the policies on page 144, particularly, for example, the naming policy and the play policy, which have both been given a low priority, but I understand work is progressing on both of those in terms of the early engagement, as well as the comments in the paper as that it's expected to be presented this year and for public consultation this year. Why would the ones, if there is a limitation in resource, why are these policies that have been determined to be quite low priority being progressed already?
So against those criteria that we set out, the naming policies is probably deemed low, primarily because there's no statutory requirement for review. However, there's a significant overdue element, because there are 3 policies that are being included there, and one of those policies is 25 years old. So the intent behind that review and bringing it forward was to, and bringing it onto the work plan, is to try and bring those policies into active use. A lot of the issues that we are dealing with in that space as an organisation are due to the fact that the policies are not current. So bringing those onto the work program when they were was an attempt to address that that issue within the organisation.
And why would the play policy be being worked on currently?
That one in itself is actually not being managed through the strategy and policy team. It's actually being managed through the community development team with support from one of our teams. So that's not an active piece of work for our team as such, but we do provide a little bit of support there. The reason for the review, I understand, was primarily given the age of the policy, so it had a relatively short time frame, and to facilitate the work that's happening around the strategic plans at the moment, where there's some overlap between the play policy and the recreation play plan, it was deemed to be an appropriate time to do that review.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Zabellin.
Thank you, and thanks, Peter. I did just have a couple of other questions about the local alcohol policy. So from this table, I can see that that work's due to begin later this year. So I'm just wondering sort of how late would we look at getting the jump on a couple of months, or is it like a full half year away?
It's a good question. We didn't lock ourselves into a specific month, but if we can be sort of deductive about it, December's not much of a month to get started on anything. I imagine this would have been started around about that October-November period, and it would have largely depended on decisions that had not been made yet, such as if we were to fill the vacancy for the senior policy analyst, that would free up a lot more resource to take that work forward in, say, September, October, as opposed to October, November. But if it were to be brought forward, then we are looking at accelerating it by probably 4 to 5 months at most.
Okay, thank you. And this might be a bit of a guesstimate, but what's the kind of rough time frame to get this kind of work through to completion? How long before we might look to have one adopted?
Well, for those who have been around the table a long time, I hope it's not as long as the last one. I would say, in general terms, for a piece of work of that complexity, 12 to 15 months is generally the duration we expect, and that allows for early engagement, or initial engagement, I should say, research to bring the information around alcohol-related issues up to date, and then developing a policy and going through a formal consultation process.
Okay, thank you. And just last question was, is there any intersection or correlation between this and the alcohol control bylaw work that's going on at the moment? Do they talk to each other at all?
Not really. So the alcohol control bylaw is exclusively related to the liquor ban. The alcohol policy is more around those licensing issues and managing the availability of alcohol.
Cool, great, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Peter. With the alcohol control, the alcohol policy that you've said would be 15 months, how does that affect the DLC in terms of it trying to implement decisions?
So the local alcohol policy, once adopted, the DLC is required to give consideration to the matters set out in the policy. In the absence of an LAP, the DLC still continues to make decisions, but the policy direction, I guess, isn't there. So it'll be referring to the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act as its primary direction.
Does it slow anything up, or?
No.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just on top of the LAP, Peter, given we've now had a year of evidence from Auckland with their LAP, which is similar to what we're doing, and all evidence seems to be showing it's not working, why would we pursue a policy that doesn't seem to be working elsewhere in the country?
The policy process for our local alcohol policy would be to look at the issues for Palmerston North and then identify within the parameters that the LAP permits what are the levers we could pull that may make a difference to the alcohol-related problems, particularly to Palmerston North. So I can't answer how Auckland's policy is working or not working. There's no guarantee that our policy would resemble Auckland's policy. It would depend largely on the issues that we've identified through that research process.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. That's done our questions. Thanks very much. And we have a recommendation there around receiving the memo titled Strategy and Policy Work Programme 26-27 presented today on the 22nd of April 2026, and that the Chief Executive prioritise the development of the local alcohol policy, moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Arnott. Are you quite happy to move both of them? Yeah, just saves a bit of admin. Do you want to speak to that?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So those who've been sitting around the table for a long time will know, the local alcohol policy has been worked on for some time and then ended up being withdrawn because of a change in legislation. And since then, it seems to have there just seems to have been little action on it from a council perspective. And I believe that where we've got oversight of policy development in terms of being able to set priorities, that the development of a local alcohol policy is more important than a review of the play policy, or more important than a review of naming policies, or whatever. This directly impacts use and misuse of alcohol in the city, and I think that work should begin on it. I was not aware that the policy team were under-resourced, so that has information that's come out just now. And I understand that everybody's doing their best with the resources that they've got, but given that, I think there is a role for elected members to be clear about what we consider the priorities to be. And looking at this list of policy development work that's planned, to my mind, the local alcohol policy is more important than some of the other work that's on that list. The other thing I would say is that the whole concept of a local alcohol policy is that it's local. It's meant to be based on local research, and it's a local answer to local issues. So I don't think we want to be automatically having a closed mind to developing a local alcohol policy on the grounds that it hasn't worked well in Auckland, because I think, as we've often said, we're not Auckland, and our situation is different. So all we're asking for at this stage is that this be moved up the batting order, basically, for those who like a sporting analogy, and that the resourcing be prioritised to this rather than other valuable but less urgent policies. So I hope for your support. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I think it's worth having this conversation today because I take quite the opposite view of the mover, and that my preference would be we don't develop a local alcohol policy full stop. The mechanisms that a local alcohol policy enables is either bringing forward the time in which shops close for sale of alcohol, bringing forward or pushing back the time in which clubs or bars or pubs are able to be open and sell alcohol, or sports clubs. Those are the mechanisms that an LAP allows us to use. Our LAP got caught up in the same problem that Auckland's had, which is it was challenged by many of the providers, and then we would have had to battle it out in the courts to have got it through. What changed in legislation is that now no longer do objectors have the ability to challenge it through the court, and so if we start again and go back to square one, we can push a policy through without having to go through that court objection process. So although I agree the local context is important, the mechanisms are what the LAP enable. And so I think it's useful to take feedback from other areas which have developed LAPs and seeing if those mechanisms have achieved what they set out to achieve. This is the Heart of the City, Auckland's business consultation organisation, that did a submission for Auckland Council a year out after the LAP and asked their members, have you experienced or noticed any changes as a result of the LAP? And these are some of the key themes that came through from their feedback. There have been no improvements or changes in patron behaviour, levels of disorder or public safety. The intent of the LAP is not being achieved through the rules. It would be much better to focus on transport, policing, street management and mitigating crucial late night harm reductions. The restrictions on trading hours take away opportunities for turnover. They're not being able to trade between 4 and 8 has a negative impact on venues who aren't able to open for sports events televised in the Northern Hemisphere. There's a whole range, and you can please, I'd encourage you all to have a read through the feedback that they've had as a result of these policies. I agree with you, councillors. We should reduce alcohol harm. but tinkering around the edges with the times in which venues are able to be open, spending 18 months of council resource, time, energy, community consultation, all of that, to ultimately achieve nothing is not a good use of our time, it's not a good use of our community's time, and it's certainly, in my opinion, not a good use of ratepayer dollars. If an alcoholic who has an alcohol problem goes to the store at 9:30 the day after this policy is implemented and can't buy alcohol, you know what they're going to do the next day? They're going to go to the store at 8:45. So you haven't achieved anything. And this is the problem. It's well-intentioned, it's well-meaning, and I hear your desire, councillors, to do something. But policing is the crucial role here. Addiction support is the crucial role here. Not tinkering around the times of sale, which is the primary drive that these LAPs have had. So my preference would strongly be A, don't bring this work forward, it's not a priority, and B, push out the work at the time that it comes to discussing it, because we haven't had one for the last 100 years, and I don't see a problem in our community that can be addressed by it, and I don't think we'll have a problem in our community that can be addressed by these times for the next 100 years. So please, councillors, if this doesn't go through today, I'll be very happy to move at the time when we get to it, that we shelve this work. Not trying to have a crack at our officers' work either. You've done the work you've been asked to do, so no disrespect to you. You've been doing what the council's directed. But my personal view is LAPs don't have the tools, the mechanisms, or the ability to deal with the problems you're trying to deal with. Therefore, it shouldn't be a priority, and in fact, in my opinion, shouldn't be done.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Firstly, I just want to say I think it's been really useful for this report to come to council. I think in reflecting over the recent years, sometimes we've had policy work come to council, and I've looked at it and I've thought, how did this end up, being progressed? And we haven't, as elected members, had really much input into what gets worked on and what time frame. So I do think it's useful, particularly when there are resource or capacity issues, to deliver on work that we are addressing the most important work. And certainly I see some of the lower priority policies in there that I think could quite happily wait. I don't think as urgent in any sense of the word. Addressing the second recommendation, which I strongly support, I am very much in favour of us prioritising the local alcohol policy. And whilst today is not the day to get into debating the merits of that policy, I guess I do need to point out some perhaps assumptions that were being made by the previous speaker I don't agree with. I think there are mechanisms within there, and perhaps those of us who heard the experts come and make submissions the last time we went through this process, perhaps the previous speaker wasn't here during that time and didn't hear that evidence, but there was strong evidence, particularly around off-licence premises and the impact that making alcohol available late at night for those problem drinkers, there was strong evidence in terms of the mechanisms that we can use through that policy that will make a difference, and there was strong evidence to support that. So I did at least want to make that comment, because I would hate for those comments to be made perhaps incorrectly without the that to be, I feel it's important to for me to be able to say I believe there is good reason for us to explore this. If we're truly interested in limiting alcohol-related harm in our community, this is the mechanism that is available to us to do that, and I would strongly support that being prioritised.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, sir. Look, I was happy to second this. I grew up with alcohol around me in not a positive way, so I have first-hand experience with knowing how much harm that can do to families. Look, I see this as being positive. It was put in place for a reason. I don't like the thought of what could happen if it's not. So on that basis, very happy to second. Thank you.
Councillor Harper.
Thank you. I think we're getting a little bit carried away. All of the mover of the second recommendation here is asking for it to be prioritised ahead of the other policies and not dramatising it and discussing it at length. I think the whole point of this is just to prioritise it over the others. Let's just be real. That's all we're asking to do. Put it ahead of everything else. Let's not discuss the policy because that's not what we're here to discuss. Let's just be black and white. Put it ahead of the others. Thank you.
Councillor Bellon.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand where Councillor Johnson is coming from in terms of prioritising policies that might be more widely impactful. But to my mind, it is scheduled to begin anyway in the not too distant future. So I'm not sure that bumping it up the chain by a few months is such a significant gain to offset prompting a reshuffle in the resourcing and work allocation of the whole policy team. I just don't have enough clarity on the impact of that, I guess. I understand that the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act applies in the absence of a local alcohol policy, so I think we can't say that there aren't rules and regulations in place at present to kind of control or regulate that kind of harm. And I think Peter had a well-made point that it's experienced staff required to deal with what's quite a complex and lengthy piece of work, and that might not be available until a little later down the track. So at present, I think I am actually in favour of just leaving the staff to allocate their work as their resourcing allows, noting that this is scheduled to start this year anyway. But I'll keep listening and we'll see.
All right, Councillor Nally, you've already spoken. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you. It has been interesting to hear the debate and quite concur with Councillor Hoppeta's view. I think the reason primarily for me to vote in support of this is a concern that sometimes things change. Sometimes they change quite quickly after they leave this room, sometimes they don't. And so while we could be comforted, and perhaps even should be comforted, by a table that says 26, 27, well, goodness gracious, pretty soon it's 28, 29, 30. If we want to be clear about what we want for our community, to have the tools available to the community, albeit some of them imperfect, Councillor Wood, we should not set up the perfect as the enemy of the good, and I would suggest that what we do is give a very clear signal to our staff that this is a priority, and the actual timing, whether it's 26, 27, will undoubtedly be a complex reality, but the point here is about priority and ensuring that the priority is right and leave the exactitudes of timing to the staff.
Do you want to write a reply? Councillor.
Thank you, and thanks for your comments, colleagues. I think it would be fair to say that it's a little early to be saying that a policy that we haven't developed yet won't work. It's also a little early and perhaps a little confident to be saying that no matter what we do, nothing will change for the next 100 years. Because I think both of those things I just can't agree with. There are other tools that were not mentioned that could be employed in a local alcohol policy, like a one-way door, like location rules, like density rules, things that the community have been asking for. So I would like to see us develop this in priority over some of the other policies that are less important for the community. So we don't yet know what this policy is going to look like. So how you can oppose it at this stage, I don't know. But if you genuinely believe that the play policy and the naming policy are more important than the local alcohol policy, then by all means don't vote for it. But I know what I think.
Everyone okay we put them together? We get through it? Right, good. Okay, so colleagues, we've got the recommendations there around accepting the memo, and then the second one's around prioritising LAP. I'll ask you to vote, please. And that has passed 12 votes for and 2 against. All right. Moving through to number 10, which is around 48 Cambridge Terrace, Ashurst, and decision pending around the property portfolio review there. Perrine, welcome.
Afternoon. I think it's been a while since we've actually brought a report to council around consulting on a lease. Just for those councillors that are new, obviously, just yourself today. Just for context around the report, usually to consult on a lease, it does come to committee. In this case, it's come to full council, being that part of the proposal has been to dispose of the building on site. That sits with full council. Just wanted to get some direction prior to actually consulting. In regards to the leasing process, just for clarity, just refresh everyone's memory, I guess. We do need to seek expressions of interest as per our support and funding policy. While we have had a interested party, for transparency and consistency, we do seek expressions of interest to the whole of the community. Just one final thing to note, I guess I've had some time to sit around and read my report multiple times. I guess within the report, while the recommendation has included disposing of the building to reduce those risks around the condition of the building, there is the option for it to remain a land and building lease. However, there, I guess, is some risks associated with that. While we can outline some terms and conditions within the lease agreement, I think the lowest risk here would be to dispose of the building itself. I'm happy to take any questions. Hopefully that all.
Thanks, Perrine. I've got a couple. So we're talking about the old Red Cross Ashurst building, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. It's in pretty poor state, isn't it?
Yes, and since it has been vacant, there has been a few times, and I think each time I go on site, it seems to be more damage from the community. But yes, it is in derelict condition.
So you're talking, when you say damage, vandalism type?
Yes.
Damage. Yeah, okay. Is there any real interest in it?
We have had two people reach out, one being the Ashurst Mixed Martial Arts Club. They currently are occupying a garage at a residential property. Yeah. The other interested party has only reached out once, which we have tried to contact. That individual isn't a registered organisation that would probably fit the support and funding policy, but however we do have one interested party.
And what about the Ashurst Scouts? Because they did come to us a number of years ago. Have they indicated any interest?
Officers haven't reached out yet. Okay. However, that has been a group that we will be probably directly contacting. They do still have the lease. Well, they did have a proposal to lease at the Ashurst domain, but they haven't made any progress with the building construction. Obviously, the costs are related to that.
Okay. So if we were to seek expressions, i.e. 1A, what would be you go out to the wider community and say, as is, where is, lease for minimal peppercorn, people would have to do something to the building themselves. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Deputy Mayor.
Tēnā koe, Your Worship, and kia ora, Perrine. Just with regards to 2.4, it lists that due to, following the asbestos testing, it's been confirmed that there is asbestos in multiple areas of the building. Who has liability for repairing that? If we were to, say, put it out to lease or rent, surely there's a duty of care on the council for that, is there? And at what cost?
I guess that's part of the proposal to sell the building for $1, being a nominal value, and that would be as is, where is. The information regarding asbestos has been provided to the group that has shown interest. I guess maybe for clarity, there is asbestos within the building, however it's not disturbed. So it is safe as of current. However, if they were to do any works, that would something that would be need to be managed by a tenant if we do choose to lease. That would need to be clear in, I guess, the terms and the conditions of the lease, and also in a sale and purchase agreement if we were to sell the building as part of that arrangement, if that hopefully answers it.
In part, having dealt with old school buildings that were full of asbestos, I'm aware that, you know, that there's a great danger in that, and we might say if it's undisturbed, it won't be a problem. However, even an earthquake could shake something loose, or if people were to, if we did decide to rent it out, do we put conditions on that they would get a builder who had the knowledge of removing that asbestos or dealing with it without disturbing things? I'm just a bit concerned that we would pass on a problem and that we wouldn't be providing appropriate duty of care or a moral obligation.
I understand your concern. So we have a full report done by an asbestos company that has outlined where the areas of the asbestos is. I guess part of the consultation, which probably hasn't been clarified, is we could look to seek a cost on removing of that asbestos. I guess part of the investigation into the building, we've tried to cover off as much as we can, e.g. the cost to repair into a condition that's suitable, but that's something we can look to, I think, probably further and make that clear with tenants.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship.
So on that, Preen, most of it's a tin, I mean, I've been in it when the Red Cross were there, so most of it's a tin shed, isn't it? Am I roughly?
Majority, yes.
Yeah.
There is, it does say that there is asbestos in the report. There's not a significant amount of asbestos. It is just small areas.
Yeah.
That full report hasn't been provided.
There's not even a ceiling, is there?
No. Yes.
So the asbestos is...
It's minor. It is
it's a small
minor,
A,
and I
isn't
guess
it?
why
Yeah.
it hasn't been highlighted significantly as a huge major issue in this.
Yep, okay.
I do think it can be mitigated.
Yep, okay. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Green, for the report. Both options, whether we lease it or demolish it, say that we'd retain the land and land bank it. It's on a relatively decent spot of land on Cambridge Ave. Does council have a strategic use in mind for it, given we're going through a program of works looking at non-strategic assets we'd divest? Is there any reason we'd keep this plot?
So that has been raised as part of the property review. My colleague may want to jump in, but I'll speak for him. So part of that review is including any land that has been considered excess. This plot of land has come to council many years ago in another report about it being excess land. However, at the time, there was some feedback from the community to retain it. However, but that is something that could be revisited as part of that review. I guess in this instance, we've considered that it probably shouldn't be a standalone review and that it's part of the entire property review.
So just to understand the decision we're making today, saying that, A or B, that we would land bank the site, that doesn't preclude it from being considered as part of our strategic property review?
No.
So we're not making a decision today that we will keep this plot forever?
No.
Okay, cool. Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Preen. That's all the questions done. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I've got recommendations there. Councillors, I go monthly to do a Meet the Mayor session out at Ashurst, and this has been brought up a couple of times. Preen sort of indicated there might be some interest that perhaps could be teased out. I think it'd be wise to at least explore that first before going to B. So I'm going to move that one council agree to progress the following option A, that we just test the waters there, and that would then engage number 2, would it? Yes. Engage number 2, that if council agrees, an option 1A, that we endorse the intention to dispose of the building for $1 for any future community group or organisation that has entered into a community occupancy agreement. And the reason, and I'll look for a seconder on that, thank you, Councillor Mickelard. The reason I say that is that even the Red Cross, and remember, there's different Red Cross groups, even over the city. There's an Ashes, there's a city group, and there's other fielding groups, etc., etc. Even some of the Ashes group thought they may have got out of it. And admittedly, it was a lot older people that were the volunteers too soon. Look, the building is in pretty poor state. It's basically a tin shed with some holes in it, and no ceiling, and obviously a little bit of asbestos which we've discovered. I think there's no harm in us just testing the waters to see what happens, make it quite a quick turnaround to the officers and bring it back to us. If there's somebody there that wants to do it, good on them. We've provided them a pathway. If there isn't, then it just comes back and we go to another part of that. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a process question, if I may, with the exclusion of B there. So, in practical terms for our officers, does that mean if we're out consulting the community on this, we need to go back out to them if we then couldn't find a tenant and decide to demolish it? Is that what it means practically? Like, I'm trying to grasp, was there a reason they were combined together in the first place as an efficiency thing, or is it perfectly fine to do them as two separate processes?
I guess the rationale for leaving it separate being that it was to test council's thoughts on actually disposing of the building or it remaining a ground and land lease. Is that, sorry, just...
But in the recommendation it had an or, it had an A or B, implying we didn't have to make a choice. We could just go out to community with both options and say, should we demolish it or should we put someone in it?
Yes, you can. However, demolition of the building isn't required to be consulted on, being that it has no value. The asset itself has no value. It is delegated to council to dispose of an asset. It doesn't need public consultation. However, I guess you could mitigate that risk by consulting the public if you felt that it needed feedback.
And so if we left B in, does that mean in practice it goes away from this chamber and if you can't find a tenant, we drive into Ashes and see it demolished the next day? Or is there still a check that it comes back to us before demolishing if we had B as part of it?
And the intention was that if we didn't find any suitable candidates that we would proceed to looking to demolish. Okay. I guess in the report, I don't have it sitting with me, there was a section around that officers felt if we, not consulting on demolition of the building, being that partly that we were intending to use operational funds within this financial year to demolish the building. I guess delaying that further by consultation, it would probably look towards the next financial year.
With you. So just to be clear, with A and B, the plan A is still to go out and see if you can find a tenant. You wouldn't demolish it before you'd gone and tested the market to see if there was someone interested.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'll just speak briefly to that then, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if you want to include B in light of that, but my view is absolutely, you're right. We should go out, test the community, see if anybody's interested in it. And if nobody is, well, then demolish the building. I don't see the need for another paper to come back to council. Unless we hear a big call from my colleagues to save the tin shed, I'm quite content to do both at the same time. So I don't know if I vote against it or if I move an amendment to include B. I'll just see where the debate goes and we'll see where we get on. But I'd rather we included B.
So advice I've just got that it does have to come back to us and we just make a decision. The officers don't have the delegated authority just to go and demolish it. So it does come back to us. And my understanding it'll be a one-page report. So I can't see why we'd put B in at this stage. And look, if we are genuine on trying to find a community group. Could I just, with the seconder's approval, I just want to add in an Ashurst group, because I'd hate to think that we might get a Wanganui no, seriously, or even a city group that just goes out there and this is about Ashurst, and they feel quite strongly about it, and a few of them have spoken to me about it. So And look, all we're doing, I mean, you can recall we had this conversation around the Jockey Club several times, and as soon as we tried to touch that, you know, everybody that wanted to be somebody in Ashes came at me. So I think we've got to treat this with the same sort of level of concern as well. Councillor Happer.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I also wanted A and B to stay in, as I just think that coming back with a separate paper is a bit a waste of time, because I do think that she also talked about not being able to find anyone at the moment already. So I think that we've already gone round the traps and tried to find somebody and haven't been able to find anybody in the community. So I don't actually know what we're going out to look for if there isn't anybody out there already. So I was looking to want 1A and B in there already. So I'm not really sure if I'm going to be voting against it as well. Thank you.
To be clear to the officers, you have had some interest, am I right? Yeah, thank you. Okay, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, I don't actually support us going out for a community lease for this building. It's in very poor condition. If we sell it for $1 and the group then doesn't do anything to it, we're in a position where we've got a derelict building on our land that we can't do much about. It's on the edge of a piece of green space which would be able to be consulted on as surplus land. I think one of the reasons that it wasn't accepted previously was because it was bundled up with a whole lot of reserves that were also in the offing for being sold off for land. Whereas this is really, as far as I know, it's just used for BMXing and stuff like that at the moment. It's not, I don't know. But anyway, I don't want to preempt any of that. But I just think that in this case, the poor condition of the building would be safer for council to demolish the building and then reconsider the site. Rather than putting a community group in a really poorly maintained building, expecting them to maintain it, maybe they don't maintain it to standard, and then we're in a difficult situation. So I just think it would be better to just go straight to B. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor.
Tēnā koe, Your Worship, and I completely support what Councillor Johnson has said. I think she read my mind from across the room. But I wouldn't feel comfortable with us knowing that there is asbestos in this building, knowing how shocking it is. It's in a terrible state. I wouldn't feel comfortable with anyone in our community, one, having to pay rent for it and going in it. And I think that we've got to make sure that when we provide something for people in our community, that it's safe, hand on heart, that it's a safe place. Yeah, I'm saddened to see that it got to this stage, but even a little bit of asbestos is bad enough. I wouldn't even, none of us are experts to say, oh, you won't be harmed by that. So my dealings with asbestos buildings hasn't been a good one, and I was never prepared to take the risk with those, and I'm not prepared to take a risk here either. I think our community deserves better. Kia ora.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you. Apologies, this is a little bit of a question and the comment as part of it, just being the new person around the right way to do things, but I won't be supporting A, with my preference being that I think we should move to B, but I want to move to amend B, that we look towards selling the site. So I've got some wording around that to considering, so we get a paper back. I don't see any real reason as to why council should be holding this piece of land and think the money would be best used to pay down council borrowing. So I suppose my little question there is just, do I vote that down and then move that? Is that? Yeah,
you vote accordingly, councillor, and if it fails, then B will come up. But I'm unsure about your other amendment. All right. Okay, well, I'll just have right a reply. Look, guys, I probably spend the most time out of anybody out at Ashurst, and look, I agree the building's not flash, but you've got to understand what the people think. Would it be something for them? And the martial arts, my understanding, the martial arts guys are quite keen on doing a bit of the work themselves, and they're pretty industrious type people. So they would probably be quite a good owner. But look, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but just you give them an option. If it doesn't work, then B becomes your option. I can't see why you wouldn't have a look first instead of going straight to B, especially as pretty well everybody around here hasn't even been in the building. So ask you to support A. You're giving the people of Ashurst an opportunity. If it doesn't work, the officers come back to us quite quickly with B, and then you've got your result. But going to B straight away without exploring anything, regardless of what you think the building is closing off options, in my opinion. So we'll go to a vote. Thank you. And that's failed. 4 votes for and 7 against. Yeah. So that's the Deputy Mayor's vote didn't get through, but she's against as well. So that's failed. So we've got B on the table. But you want to put an alternative, councillor? Before we go there, is there a seconder? Okay. We'll just get it up on screen first. Yeah, so it's, yeah. They'll have to explain it. Can you just check if it's reserved? I'm just checking if it's reserved.
Consultant it separately if we go straight to selling it. Why don't you just say with the intent to include it as part of the property review that we're currently undertaking?
Okay, we've just been checking the actual zoning of the piece of land, so can we get, okay, so we've got, who's your seconder? Councillor Naylor, okay. All right, over to you, Councillor Fitzgerald. You speak to this. Yep.
Yes, so I'm looking to amend this slightly, although Councillor Wood has just suggested some wording that might tidy that up a little bit, so which I'm happy with. I might let you speak to that. Yeah, in due course, if that's all right. Yeah, but I'll speak to the overall and then I'll let that come later, and I'll be happy to go with that amended wording. But yeah, look, this is a derelict site. In fact, I happened to be in the area a year ago before I'd even decided to run for council, and I stopped to take a phone call. I parked up in the car to take a phone call outside this particular building. I hopped off the phone and I said some words that I can't say in the chamber. What an awful building. What on earth? And I had no idea it was a council-owned building until this paper came. So I'd be very happy to see this horrible building demolished safely, the asbestos removed in a controlled manner, and then we move towards selling the site and reducing borrowing. This is not I believe, a strategic holding for the council to have. So I think it would be better sold to someone who will make good use of it, and then we can wash our hands of it. Thank you.
Can I just get an understanding from you, councillor, are you talking about the entire site or just the building site? The whole site? Okay. Okay, all right. Councillor Johnson. Well, hold on, no, are we talking about the quarry site, the whole site? Well, no, that's not the whole site. No, you are talking about, yeah, okay. I think we might have to just put an address on there because this is so vague.
Sorry, can I ask a question, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Do we not have to consult on this?
Yeah.
Okay. So what are we consulting on? Selling how much land? The whole thing? Just the land that the building sits on? I don't understand. Last time we proposed this site, it had to be consulted on, so I assumed it would have to be consulted on a second time.
My understanding it's zoned recreational, so we'll need some. There'll be something that needs.
Well, some of it's zoned recreation, some of it's zoned industrial, I think, according to the paper. Out of business, beg your pardon. Can we be clear about what it is that's intended to be sold, and also whether or not we need to consult? Thank you.
Okay, we just might get a little bit of advice first.
Before I comment on whether I'm supporting or not.
I'll just ask the CEO to clarify.
Through Mr. Mayor, even though part of this area is zoned differently, the entire site, including the area marked in salmon and recreation, having a look at our systems, is all under it's one property. So we do need to, I think that there's, as I was thinking about this as well anyway, as you're aware, we already do have some work coming through to you shortly about strategic property review and the like. It would be appropriate to send it to there rather than try and do what is intended here at the moment as advice.
Okay. I mean, the floor is with me, but I don't really want to comment unless I know if this is going to be changed. Is it being changed? Okay.
So councillors, we've got there now and need to get the approval of the mover and the seconder that we are talking around demolishing the existing building at 48 Cambridge Avenue, Ashurst, and to include in the strategic property review. Are we right? I'm getting nodding heads. So that is fine.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the clarification. I do support this for the reasons I mentioned before about demolishing the building, but all the building sits on land that we need to consult on before we make any decision about what we're going to do with it. And so I certainly wouldn't have supported straight out selling it, but I'm happy to support it being included in the strategic property review, which will be consulted on before any decisions are made. Thanks.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the mover and seconder. I think it is better that this be included in the review process we're going through. The note that I'd just make is, if you look at the table 2.6 in the paper, there's, well, I'd say maybe an eighth of that whole title that's zoned out of business, the rest that's zoned recreational. So there could be an opportunity as we go through the strategic property review, do we separate off the business zoned land and then maintain or sell or do something else with recreational land? So I think it makes a whole lot more sense being viewed in the wider parcel of land that we're looking at there, and I think it's easier to consult on one package rather than going out and doing lots of little bits of consultation. So happy to support with the amended wording.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I'm also happy to second this recommendation. I think it's important as we move forward and we look at the current and future funding environment that we find ourselves in, that we don't assume that any decisions that have been made in the past are what we automatically assume is our current or future decisions. So particularly when it comes to property, I think I guess I would hope that me indicating to staff not to just assume what's been decided 5 years ago or however many years ago when this had been looked at, but to look at it with fresh eyes and consider weighing up the merits of keeping sites that may not have an identified strategic purpose, and consider which aspects of those could be exchanged for funding and to enable some of the other priority work that council is interested in progressing. So from that perspective, I think anything that comes up, such as this property, we do need to have a think and look at it through that lens.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too will support this. However, I just wanted to add that if I could have my way, I'd say demolish that old building and see if we can get someone to donate a better building and put on, because I am mindful of the fact that the community need things and places, but I just knew that I didn't feel comfortable with the state of that particular building. And so I wanted to say that, but I know I don't have my wish. I haven't won lotto yet to be able to buy them a building that would be good, to replace it. But yeah, I'm happy to support this. Thank you.
Does Mr. Lobb know?
No, not yet.
Before I go back to you, councillor, for a right of reply, look, I've moved on. I mean, this is where we're going now. So, fine with the direction of travel. It is the former quarry site for New Zealand Railways there for the Ashurst railway line and into the gorge. Our planners unfortunately missed an opportunity to fill the hole when we were doing the new road. It was a bit unfortunate that we weren't able to use some decent compacted fill to fill the big hole there. But there is an opportunity with the new footbridge, and I do hope that our planners keep mindful of this, that we try and fill, because that reserve hasn't been utilised because it's got a great big hole in the middle of it. And to fill that would be quite expensive, but while there's going to be fill coming out of abutments for the new pathway bridge, we should be trying to grab some of that and start to compact that area, because then you'll find there probably will be a use for that land, and I'm thinking more in a recreational reserve type way. The other land, which that adjoins it, which is what 48 Cambridge Avenue is, and it goes on to, flows around into the other street there, the side street, I forget the name of it now, could be quite strategic actually, in terms of housing / light industrial, whatever that may be. So, look, there's no harm in doing this, so I support it as well. I wouldn't support a straight out sale, because we just don't quite know what that would bring, but certainly throwing it into the strategic property review is probably quite smart, so I'm quite happy to support it. Do you need a right of reply, councillor? You do want one, okay.
Just a quick note to say thank you, colleagues, for working with me to get that wording correctly there. That was the intent of what we're after, so thank you.
Okay, we'll put it to the vote. It's passed, 12 votes for, none against. All right, we'll move through to number 10, which is around the local government elections. And I'll ask our governance manager, Hannah, to speak to that.
Kia ora koutou elected members. I have to be honest, I had a moment last night when I realised this was on the agenda and I relived last year. It does feel like a bit of a dream ago now, but it is important that we do publicly report on lessons learned from the running implementation of the local election 2025. Look, this paper and the work itself was certainly a team effort, and unfortunately because this paper has moved to today, I actually haven't got our electoral officer with us online today. He's actually meeting with the electoral reference group in Wellington specifically to discuss booth voting at this time, so he's unavailable. And our wonderful marketing manager is up in the chairs if we need any questions with regard to the amazing work of the design team and the marketing team that worked for this. Look, the creative team effort was mammoth, right from our web team helping, our communications advisor Liana Mua, again our communications manager is away today and unable to join us, but I will hopefully be able to answer any of your questions. If not, as I say, Jess is here. Look, as I said, this is a lessons learned exercise for us. You'll remember we did workshop this back in February, and some of that is covered here, as well as the information we received from a survey that went out to candidates. The paper doesn't cover a couple of things that will come to you this year. So some of you will be aware that we'll need to look at the electoral system. We need to make a decision as to whether we use FPP or STV again, and we'll do that before September this year. Following that decision, the next piece of work will be the representation review, which is due this term. Again, that will be a series of papers that will come to you over the next 18 months or so. So that's not what's been covered here. The 2025 election, of course, was unique in that it included a binding referendum. The referendum itself diverted some resource from what would otherwise have been focused on the election, but it also offered an opportunity for the educative materials to be developed in that space. You'll be aware that turnout in Palmerston North did increase. We can't tell why. We won't know if this is attributable to whether it was because of an uptake of the referendum. We'll see that in future years' patterns. I am happy to take questions either to this or the next paper.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I've got a couple of questions. The first one is about the disallowed special votes. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know, did you get much feedback from, I guess it's the electoral company, is it? Mm-hmm. Did you get much feedback from them about, I guess, ways that we could improve the number that were allowed next time?
Maybe a little bit more background before I answer directly that question, Councillor Johnson. I am interested in patterns across the country and patterns between electoral providers, and I have looked at the numbers for the other electoral provider as well as our own. Councils that worked with election services do have a higher number of disallowed special votes, and so I have asked our electoral provider to explain. The key difference that we have been able to identify is that the legislation is rather prescriptive when it comes to what must be checked to allow a special vote, and our current provider is much more strict against that criteria than the competition. Both providers have identified this as a challenge to counting special votes, and in the inquiry that's been run by the Justice Select Committee have said that they would prefer that legislation to be changed in order to allow more. The one criteria that they've identified which disallowed votes for Palmerston North was around, there's a box on the form which is required as a part of the declaration before the special vote is counted that lists all the information that the Electoral Commission would usually receive from a voter who was enrolling, and that includes the box on employment, and where people left that empty, didn't put their employment status, their special vote was disallowed. However, the Electoral Commission has actually stopped requesting that information despite the fact it's in the legislation. So we have a discrepancy between different electoral providers, including the Electoral Commission and the legislation. And so that's been identified by all the providers in the current inquiry.
So if I was a special voter and my special vote was disallowed, would I know that?
No.
Okay. In terms of, and there's a special name for it which I've forgotten, but in terms of candidates appointing someone to look at the votes at the count, did any candidates do that?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. Usually we have a couple of candidates that do request it. Of course, the scrutineers now have to go to Auckland, so it disencourages, for want of a better word, that process. But it certainly happens, and as far as I'm aware, there were a few applications to do so.
Okay, all right, I'll leave the special voting aside then. The other question I had was around, gosh, what was it? Sorry, I might come back in the queue if it comes back to me, sorry.
Councillor Bellin.
Thank you, and thanks, Hannah. I had a question about the cost sharing with Horizons, and that we were able to recover about 36% of the total cost, and that you note there in the future that will fall 100% to us if the council is disbanded. Does that equate to less work and materials and therefore a reduction in our costs, or is that in effect a net increase to our cost?
Very good question, and that it wouldn't be 100% of the difference would have to be paid by us because there would be some less costs. However, there's also cost sharing, which would become a burden to us. So it's a bit of both. Okay. We had the same problem when the DHBs were disbanded because they used to take about 30% of the cost for us. So yeah, it's similar.
So it might fit somewhere between sort of 0 and 36% and fall in the middle somewhere there. Okay, thank you. And my other question was about the increased cost for the postal ballot being 47.3% this time around. And you just mentioned before that the electoral officers meeting to discuss booth voting. Just wondered, do you know if that's looking more promising than it has in the past because of that cost increase?
There's certainly been some conversation. I wouldn't call it investigation at this stage by DIA as to what would be required from a legislative change position, because the way the legislation is at the moment, it's interpreted to mean that even if you do booth voting, you also have to do postal. You can't do either or, which would be even more cost to councils. So my understanding is there are conversations at the moment about whether there could be some change to allow either or and what that might look like, because there'd be implications, for example, for non-residential ratepayer voters or voters who are residing overseas.
Right, thank you. So that would effectively have to make its way through the legislative process.
It would be.
Away.
It would require legislative change. It would also require a majority, and obviously a majority in Parliament, to make that legislative change. We've seen recommendations from that Justice Select Committee inquiry for the last 3 elections in their spaces, and they haven't been taken up by the government. So just because the Justice Select Committee is interested and asked DIA to look into something doesn't necessarily mean that it will be taken forward. So at this stage, we're working on an assumption that even if there was legislative change, it wouldn't necessarily be in place for 2028.
And then we might reasonably anticipate another increase in the cost for a postal ballot in the meantime?
If there is no change, we can expect that postal costs will increase again, yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in regards to some of the planning for, well, I guess the question there, and to note that there was a mayoral Meet the Candidate event organised, but not one for those standing for as a councillor in the whether it was for the Māori ward or for the citywide. What would be needed to actually ensure that that was an opportunity that candidates had next election? Is it a budget consideration, or is it electoral officer consideration? Where does that decision lie, and how would we ensure having an opportunity, how would we best move to ensure that opportunity for a future election?
I think part of writing this report is, as I said, a lessons learned exercise, and I think that the voice of elected members who were also candidates at the workshop was pretty clear that there would be an expectation that that would be something that would be provided by the Chief Executive for the next election. Certainly through the candidate survey and other feedback we've had, we've heard from the community as well that they are turning more and more to council as the neutral source of information when it comes to things like this. So again, I think the direction of travel, you would expect us to look into something. I don't know what that format would be, whether it would be exactly a debate, but certainly an opportunity for the public to meet with candidates organised by council would be something that we'd be looking at as part of our planning, because the first thing we'd do when we'd be planning in 3 years' time would be this report.
Okay. We made note in this report that there was the referendum for the Māori wards, but also it's not noted, but I think it's important that there was no vote required last time for the Māori wards because there was 2 candidates for 2 seats, which didn't count as a vote. And I think recognising that in the trends, that's not actually a fair capture on why, as a rationale, why we made such a jump on last year. Did you have any comment on that? How many people voted? I was just looking, as about 1,200, was it? Or 1,000 or something?
Yes, it was about, off the top of my head, it was about 1,200.
This time around for a Māori ward
Of the Māori electoral roll, yes. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Councillor Dennis and I have only compared it to the previous year, and I haven't got the figures in front of me for the 3 years prior. We're aware that there are certain parts of the community that are less likely to vote, and so it was encouraging to see, particularly that those on the Māori who are on the Māori roll were turning out higher this time, which is probably where my commentary is headed. But I think that's a fair comment, if not question, that potentially I should have looked at the previous trends of the year prior, but of course I couldn't, as you've well pointed out, that there wasn't an effective vote. Those on the Māori roll, of course, could vote because they could vote for mayor, but may have chosen not to because there wasn't a competitive race in the seat.
Yeah, thank you. And just interesting to follow it up to the tail end of the electoral process with candidates having to return the declarations around donations and expenses before the legal time frame. Was there anyone that's failed to return as a candidate their donation and expenses?
I believe that everyone in Palmerston North has returned theirs, and they're all on our website. I cannot hand on heart tell you that everyone returned them on time. I think there were a couple of people that had to be followed up by the electoral officer. That is a process that's done from Auckland. Thus, I'm not 100% familiar with it myself without actually going to look at the records. But certainly in other constituencies and other councils, there have been, the electoral officer has had to refer candidates to the police to follow up because they hadn't been followed, but that has not had to happen in Palmerston North.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, sorry. Got back in the queue. I had a question about a decision on when to release results. And I think we did discuss this at the workshop. I just wanted to follow up. So traditionally we've released progress results on a Saturday and then preliminary results on a Sunday. Given the large number of votes that seem to be cast on the last day, is that a process we would reconsider to avoid, people being told they're elected and then, well, I know they're not told they're elected, but, people thinking they're in and they're not, and vice versa?
Thank you for the question. I should have front-footed this because I did follow this up following the workshop. Elected members were interested as a way forward because of the problem that you've just identified, Councillor. The response I got from the electoral officer is that the legislation requires you to have a preliminary result published, which is the Sunday result, which does include all of the votes from the final day tally. Of course, it doesn't include the specials. The legislation does not require you to have a progress result, which is the count up until the day prior, the night prior. However, every council across the country currently does a progress result. So if Palmerston North didn't want to do that, it would mean that those announcements that happen through national media wouldn't include Palmerston North.
Okay, and when and how would a decision be made about that?
I could certainly have a conversation with the electoral officer. I could bring that back through the chamber if that was something that we wanted to look at.
Okay, I've got a couple more questions. One is, did we get the results of the candidate survey, or do only you have those results?
At the moment, I only have them. I haven't circulated them to elected members, but it is my intent to do so.
Okay. And then my last question is, there were a number of people who indicated that they were independent in the nominations process. Is there any kind of definition of independent, or could anybody say they were independent?
There's not a definition of independent. There is not a definition, but a criteria that must be met if you're claiming a party affiliation.
Yeah, which I'm aware of. So for those who said they were independent, but they were actually supported by a political party, is there no, I guess, comeback on that?
There's not.
So you're free to describe yourself as independent despite members of a political party campaigning for you, etc.?
At this stage, legislatively, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Happer.
Thank you. I've just got one question. Following up on Councillor Dennison's question, did the number of candidates for the general-wide election, did that stop the council running a meet the candidate session for the City Council because there was that many candidates?
It didn't stop it, but it was a consideration. So that's why, in answering Councillor Dennison's question earlier, the traditional debate format is not one that works well with that number of candidates. So it is part of the considerations.
So you've learnt that lesson going forward. What do you think your suggestion is going forward?
As a team, we've discussed a few things. We haven't come to any conclusions yet as to what format we would use. Some of the options might be that you would cut the debate into a couple of sessions. Some of you went to it's in the ballot sessions, which were cut into several days to make sure that there was a smaller number of candidates. That's one format that could be used. Another format could be used would be more like a meet the candidates type expo. There are several ideas.
Thank you for your response. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just following up on the same question that Councillor Dennison asked, with that feedback around perhaps council's involvement in facilitating candidate event or whatever, I think that may have been feedback a number of times in recent elections and obviously hasn't followed through. The report is good but doesn't have any specific recommendations that come out of it, as I see. Is there a role for council to determine anything for next election at this point, or would that be inappropriate?
I'm not sure that it is the most appropriate route forward. Obviously, the Chief Executive has a requirement under the Local Government Act to facilitate elector participation, and so I think that remit really sits with the Chief Executive to determine.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mickelard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just snuck in. Hannah, thank you for the report. Just want to say, what sort of learning have you taken from this that you can share with us for probably potential changes in the future, or potential, or in order to improve your experience of the 2025 election?
I'm laughing because in order to improve my experience would be a different answer to your first question, Councillor McCallum. Look, I think it is always ongoing learning. What we learned from the previous election was definitely applied to this election. So what I can talk to there is the impact that we noticed in the previous election when it came to face-to-face interactions meant that we did pivot a lot of our time and energy to face-to-face interactions this time around. Having said that, face-to-face interactions are significantly resource heavy, time heavy, and so that's why I laughed in response to the final part of the question. So yeah, my reflection would be that we'd need a larger team, and I'm not saying necessarily more resource, but to use a wider web of staff across the organisation. We have, amazing, to think a bit more creatively, like we have an amazing team in the library that work with lifelong learning, for example. So we have lots of people that are already in the community and working out how we can have more impact with less hours on a few individuals is something that I've certainly personally been reflecting on. I think we worked really well this time, understanding that we're facilitators, and if we can get the information to the people who are trusted in the community, they can get that out to their communities. And we were really focused on doing that and spent a lot of time with community leaders and teaching them to teach their people. I think that was really valuable, and I would certainly be recommending to whoever was running the election next time that they focus their time there with those community leaders. And there were certainly community areas of our community that we didn't get around to simply by being limited by the number of staff.
Councillor
Mr.
McLeod.
Chair, also wanted to touch on 5.3 where you talked about a lack of mainstream media reporting on local government elections. What sort of strategies do you see going forward to sort of combat misinformation and disinformation? Especially the lack of mainstream media reporting or the lack of exposure around policy issues, especially the fact that we had a referendum, and also the lack of exposure around candidates and that sort of thing as well.
I don't think it's necessarily any new strategies or ways of doing things, maybe more and being more aware of council's role in that space. You'll see in the attachment 1, the number of hits we had to our website as a source of truth for information this time, and how significantly that jumped from 3 years previous. There was a really good piece of work done by Taituara and LGNZ together to put together a strong website with key information, particularly around the Māori ward referendum that was well used across the country. So I think it's just being more aware of ourselves as information providers. I don't think it's necessarily a different strategy to do that.
Coming on the electoral integrity side of things, we've witnessed what happened in Papatoetoe and other parts of the nation where some ballots have been reported as stolen. When it came to special voting, did you receive any sort of reporting of duplication of voting, or someone, or any complaints of people who have had the voting papers stolen or they hadn't received the voting papers?
Certainly I had people come to us and say they hadn't received their papers, but that doesn't necessitate that therefore they were stolen. It's just that they didn't receive their papers for many different reasons.
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to highlight here is that because people will definitely come and cast special votes, and when the votes are being counted, there'll be some comparison, or I think there's some quality checks that goes with special voting.
I did provide those numbers to you in the workshop, so I don't have them in front of me today, but they were in the slides in February, the number of votes where there was 2 votes received from 1 voter. So I do have those statistics, but not on me.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay. All right, that's our questions done. Thanks, Hannah. All right, we've got a recommendation there to Council that we receive the memo titled Local Government Elections 2025, presented today on 22nd of April 2026. I'm happy to move it, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I'll open it up for any commentary. Councillor Isabella.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think it's pretty clear there were challenges for sure, but I think they've been really well canvassed in the questions. So I just wanted to particularly note that the lift in voter participation is notable and noted. It's so good to start reversing a prolonged downward trend, and undoubtedly much of that credit is due to the very significant and prolonged efforts of our governance team to get people enrolled and to let them know that there was actually an election happening. I think people say it's really tiring campaigning for 3 months, but our governance and comms teams were working for most of the year and putting in a lot of time into that face-to-face activation. As Hannah said, I've seen them at Pacifica night markets, at reference groups, at the May Day Unions meeting, council events, whenever there was a gathering, they were there spreading the word, and I think the results do credit to the effort that was put in, and I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Yes, well, I'm going to say exactly the same thing, actually. I did want to congratulate Hannah in particular, who really led from the front, but also the whole governance team for the effort that was put in engaging with people face to face, because I think that that made all the difference. And I do believe that, you know, a significant uplift in the turnout was due to having more people aware of the elections, to having all the little orange bins all over town. I mean, who knows how much of it was due to Hannah wearing orange every day, I don't know. But, you know, it was a huge effort, and it didn't go unnoticed, and I think, you know, it had a positive impact. So we're grateful for that. There is an element that concerns me in particular, and that is the disallowing of a significant portion of the special votes, almost 400 of the special votes. That could easily be enough to have changed some results. And I mean, it's disappointing to hear of results being refused on what I would consider to be a technicality because someone hasn't filled in their occupation. So that is a disappointing element. The other thing I would say is that some thought does need to be given to the timing of the publishing of results, because where results are published and then they change significantly within 24 hours, I think it creates, I mean, it's difficult for candidates, but also creates a little bit of lack of confidence in the results in the public eyes. So I would be of the opinion that if there have been a significant number of votes cast on the last day, that we don't publish progress results and we just go straight to preliminary the next day. I mean, that's just a personal opinion. But I think it's a great report. It's really helpful sort of survey of everything that was done, the good and the bad, I suppose. But we can't go past the upturn in turnout, which is significant and against the trend actually across the country. So that should really be acknowledged, and thank you very much.
Councillor Dennison.
Two things I want to speak on, and one make quite a clear point on, is around the meet the candidate opportunities for those that are standing for the election that aren't mayoral candidates. I thought there was a real disservice, again, not providing an opportunity for candidates to have a public meeting, and I think that's a disservice to the candidates, but also a disservice to the members of the public, to have a night that's well known, well promoted and well attended, and for everyone to have an equal chance in the public ear. What we end up with is a range of different invitations to community meetings, and for a new candidate, it's pretty unfair to even keep up with the timetable of it, with groups inviting us at all sorts of hours of the day, from afternoons to evenings to weekends. The fewest members of any Meet the Candidate night, I think, was 13, which was unfortunate. The limiting time for speakers, at one occasion we got 30 seconds each, which is like hardly a chance to put 5 bullet points together without any context to it. So it's left to chance on who's going to organise these ones, and they all kind of organise them with very little insight on what kind of is a fair and reasonable way to run it. And they do their best, so I do give them credit, but we end up with a hodgepodge timetable, and as a new candidate, I think that's really unfortunate. And even yet then, there's a whole bunch of members of our public that aren't connected to some of these groups, that don't even know these things are happening. So there's a lot of activity, for my view, for not as much leverage as what we may have if the council took lead in it and ran a public meeting itself. I'm quite clear on that fact. We used to do it in the past. There was no concern around people getting extra time or extra slant. Everyone got 2 minutes, and it was all equally very fair and well moderated. So I don't see the risk and the concern that kind of comes back sometimes in response to this, that, oh, we need to have our hands off to all this. And I don't see that being the right view on that at all. So quite clear on that point. The other one was just around publishing the results, giving personal views. I think it's very fair and reasonable to publish our results. For the general community to have a high interest in it, and for most candidates, you know, I think it's really of interest to where you poll. And if there's a variation, I think that's just part of the voting system with the preliminaries and the final. It's part of the territory, and we're not the only case study that happens to. It happens in various cases around the country. So quite comfortable with the timing of that, and don't think we need a change. My thoughts. Thanks.
Councillors, look, I agree. I think the meet the candidates was a missing thing, and the council has done that really well in the past. You're right, Councillor Dennison. I lost track of the amount of meetings we had to go to, and we'd turn up there and there was more candidates than the sector or the public. There was some good ones, but they were on like one hand. Where we did miss, I mean, there was a very good Meet the Mayors one at the Globe. There could have easily been over 2 nights a Meet the Candidates one, where you had independents, but the council were in the background making sure it happened. They don't need to physically run it. You just get some independent moderators to run it. And that was a bit unfortunate, because I think that would have got almost a full house, I think, because there was a lot of interest in the election. And to that, the reason there was a lot of interest, because it was really, really well run. So congratulations, Hannah, and the team that were behind that. I was going to say the Orange Man was out in force, but he wasn't. But the orange bins were. And I think they went where the people were. So if you think about supermarkets, you know, maybe there's a call for perhaps petrol stations or something, I don't know. We've got to try and get more people getting involved. I get a little bit sick of hearing, oh, you haven't got a mandate, because only 43% or whatever voted. The reality is, I mean, I think we lifted that quite considerably. I think Auckland was in the 30s or something. So look, I think well done. There does need to, perhaps we just need to keep building on all of that. Getting results out. Look, I mean, we weren't the only ones. There was a lot of late voting, and consequently a lot of late, even mayoral races too, and a lot of change that happened. So I think if you put it on balance, it was very well run at a local level. We can perhaps do a little bit better at a central government level of how it's all managed. Getting the orange bins out to where people are, perhaps having a decent long think about how people put their vote in, because I still think the postal vote system's crazy in today's world, but there doesn't seem to be an alternative at this stage. But again, just well done to the officers, and hope you support the report. Councillor Hapata.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Very quickly, 2 things. Just want to say congratulations to Hannah and to the Chief Executive for a well-run campaign. It was hard, and with all the candidates that we did have, I think we've had probably one of the highest number of candidates, but I think it was a good campaign. I think getting 42% is very good, and well done for that. I was going to say a quick comment about the Meet the Candidate session, but it has been thrashed out. I do think we are neutral as a city, and when the city runs it, people know where to go. So I do think we need to do that in future. Thank you.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, sir. Look, I too would like to say well done. Yeah, it was a big field, and it had challenges. I like the sound of an expo, but like the council one a year or so ago, that was really good, letting people know what we do. Look, I find it disappointing that there were so many votes that weren't able to be counted. I find it disappointing different counting providers have different interpretations. And yes, maybe things could have been different around this table. So that's disappointing for the ones that missed out. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Two things very quickly. One is that I find it absurd in this country private companies run elections, but the fact of the matter is they currently do, and so that means it's not good enough when we have contracts set up that require results to come in at a certain point, they get delayed day after day after day. I think next time we set up our contract with our electoral provider, I think final results are supposed to be out on the Friday, and I've stayed up till midnight refreshing the page, and then it was Saturday, and then it might have even been Sunday to see them. So I think there should be significant penalties built into our contract. It's no surprise an election's happening. It's not a mystery to them. They're contracted and paid ratepayer money to provide a good service, and they don't. So particularly in terms of the progress and preliminary, but also in terms of the final result. I think it is up to us to set out the specifications of what we expect in the contract, and that when those specifications aren't met, that they're penalised. They're a company and they should meet the requirements of their contract. The second part of it is in terms of voting. I think we could brute force the system at the moment. We have the ability to have voting stations. We've got one that we held downstairs here where people could come in, find their name in the electoral roll and vote. I would rather we didn't have to do that. I would rather the government just set up the ability for polling booths. But we could choose as a council to have 20 voting stations across the city. Wouldn't be cheap, but we could do it. So I think let's watch this space and see where legislation's at in 2 years' time. But as part of our annual budget considerations for that particular year, I would personally be quite open to allocating some additional funding to have temporary staff that man effectively our own polling stations. Not ideal. Ideally, legislation should be changed, but got to work within the system we're in.
Councillor Micklard.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I too wanted to also express the same, to echo the sentiments expressed by my colleagues in their remarks regarding the election. I just want to also congratulate Hannah and the team for a job well done. For me personally, I believe, my personal point of view, is that this has been a lot better than the 2022 experience, personally. And I think the videos have done a really, really good job of actually getting candidates out there, or putting candidates out there, and a lot of candidates actually receive a lot of exposure from those videos. So that was a game changer as well. I also wanted to say that also the location of the orange bins was a huge success. It gave people the opportunity to vote at any location that they could, that would be at the supermarket or whatever major centres that they went into, and that also reduces certain barriers when it comes to voting. When we speak about voter turnout, I believe that the referendum had a huge impact upon this. It remains to be seen whether this will be replicated. I acknowledge the 42% that we had in voter turnout in this election, which is a better outcome compared to the 2022 election where we had 36%. And we're currently we've tracked work when compared to other major centres of similar size. But I believe that the referendum also had a huge part to play in this, in raising voter turnout or bringing awareness about the election. So it remains to be seen whether this will be replicated in 2028. I think we should continuously strive to meet our goals, which have been, or our aspirations, which have been outlined in our active citizenship plan, which was of 50% voter turnout. And I believe with more effort from our team, and also us as a council enabling our team to do the work that they're supposed to do in order to drive, in order to bring awareness to bring awareness to the election, and ensuring that we engage the community and providing them with all the information that they need. And I enjoyed seeing this in this election, in the sense that the council's website was a single source of information that people would go to. And I personally was directing a lot of people when it came to the referendum and everything to do with my rewards to the council, because I believe that the information was reliable and people could trust it, as opposed to just listening to their friends on Facebook around the pros and cons of having my rewards. So from that perspective, I just want to say again, congratulations to staff. While we've reached this milestone, we should continue to aspire to become better. And I'm encouraged by what I've heard from Hannah today in saying that, there's always a need to improve when it comes to this thing. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
And finally, Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought I'd wait until the end of the line in the hopes that colleagues would cover all the ground, and they did get so close. So thank you, and I hear much good quoted around the room and concur with it. I think the piece that was in the report that I wanted to highlight was the concern around the media vacuum. And I think that as a nation, if we don't end up finding a business model that actually builds the journalistic capacity in the fourth estate, our local democracy and our broader democracy is very much in peril. That is not a comment or concern around the media that is in the room. That is around the media in aggregate, and how we actually find a solution that allows strong journalistic inquiry during the course of an election, including local elections. Thank you.
All right, colleagues, we've got the recommendation there. We will vote, please. And that's passed 12 votes for and 1 abstention. All right, colleagues, we're jumping around a little bit on the agenda. So our next item, and just no, it's not quite there yet. Jeez, it's a long day. It's a long day. Right, we're going to jump to item 15 just because of availability of people. So this is around the Central District's water-related shareholders agreement. I'll just ask the Executive Director of CDW, Chris Dyberg, to speak to this. It's on today's agenda. It's page 61 of your papers.
Kia ora koutou. Hopefully we'll keep this really brief. So today this paper is asking you to approve a new version of the shareholders agreement. This agreement, we've already signed one version of it in December, you may recall. This is the one that incorporates the Central District's Water Company as a signatory. You may recall we had a bit of a chat about this on the 8th of April at the workshop, and I went through it in reasonable amount of detail. This is the actual agreement and some specific references to the changes that are made. Hopefully I don't need to say anything more, and just happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Chris. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chris. Just one question on page 96. I don't quite understand the changes to 4E and EI and EII around, notwithstanding 4D, shareholders may by unanimous agreement jointly appoint up to 3 representatives from mana whenua to the committee. What is that something that we're trying to do? What is that? I don't understand. So we've currently appointed a mana whenua representative of each council. Is this suggesting we wouldn't do that, and that the shareholder councils would agree to 3 and 1? Or I'm not quite grasping what we're trying to do.
Yeah, so this is the one, if I sort of take you back to the time that we made the appointments to the shareholder agreement, the way that the terms of reference, the previous terms of reference worked was, it was very simple. Each council had one mana whenua representative and would appoint them, and we did envisage at that time that Ngā Tapu Aiho would be recommending 3 individuals to the 3 councils. What happened at the time, and we all agreed what was going to be okay, was that you'd get to the same effect, but they would do it as a block of 3, and but they were having some difficulties with basically identifying who the individual for each council will be. So it was the 3 nominations came to all 3 councils, and each council approved those nominations. The effect being we still had 3. And we acknowledged at the time that that was a technical non-compliance with the shareholders agreement, and that. So this is the fix to that. So what it basically means that it retrospectively allows the process we went through to be agreed. So this gives that as an option. So effectively, if all the councils agree we're going to do it like that, we can do it like that. Otherwise, we can do it the other way.
With you now, thank you.
Yep.
All right, Chris, that's our questions gone. Thank you. Recommendations to council colleagues that, one, council as a shareholder CDW approve the attached shareholders agreement with the recommended amendments and delegate the Chief Executive to sign any documents required to approve the shareholders agreement on behalf of the Palmerston North City Council. 2, that the council delegate to the Chief Executive the ability to agree any minor non-material changes to the shareholders agreement prior to the final approval and to report back to council on any changes made under this delegation. I'm happy to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Chris, for bringing this forward and tidying up the paperwork. All right, we'll vote, please. Well, everyone had a chance. Nobody put their hand up. Right, we put a recommendation up. Sorry, guys. That has passed. 8 votes for, 2 against and 1 abstention. Yeah. Okay, we'll jump back to our original order. And our next one is around, appointment of, number 11, sorry. Inquiry into the 2025 local government submission approved under Merrill. It has passed 13 votes for and none against. We will have a break. So we've got hearings back again. Councillor Fitzgerald's in the seat at 4 o'clock. I know people are gearing up for that, so all right.
Okay, let's kick off. Gosh, that microphone's sensitive. All right, I've been told I need to start with the health and safety. So if something goes horribly wrong, those are your exits there. Please enter in an orderly fashion, and I'll be shoving you out of the way. Right, so we'll move straight to the apologies. We have got an apology from Councillor Hapara, Councillor Meehan, Councillor Kuru, and Councillor Bowen. Is she online or is she an apology? Okay, we'll put Councillor Bowen as an apology on council business as well. Sorry, yes, I'll move that. Have I got to Councillor Wood is happy to second that, thank you. And I believe we need to vote on that. Yep. Do I need to push a button for that? Very good, that is carried unanimously. So we have got some submitters here today. Just refer them to the procedure sheet that you've all been sent beforehand. You'll get your 10 minutes to speak. 10 minutes will be displayed up on that screen there, so you'll be able to know where you're at. The 10 minutes includes your question time, so if you want time for councillors to be able to ask you questions, please don't speak for 10 minutes. So we can start off with the seniors reference group, and we have Joan Spencer. Oh, and Russell as well. Very good, Russell. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, just push the right button on your speakers there, and the red light will come on. Yeah, that's right, on the right. Yeah, when the red light, there you go. This one on, is it? Yours as well. Right one on.
Yeah, kia ora anō. Ina mana ina reo ina tangata o te wā. Tēnā koutou katoa. Nā mihi mai ki a koutou. Ko Russell Hallam taka wingoa, Deputy Chair of Senior Reference Group of Palmerston North City Council. And Joan Spencer, the Chair of the Seniors Reference Group on the Palmerston North City Council. We just want to say thank you very much again for the opportunity to speak as part of the group within the family, so to speak, and we appreciate the support that we get through particularly situations like this where we are encouraged to be part of the decision making, or at least have our say towards the decision making. So thank you. I'm going to hand over now to our chairperson, who will lead our discussion and discuss what our submission today. Thank you.
Is that on? Am I right? I would just quick add to that we wish to extend our thanks to council staff and Councillor Lou Finlay for engaging with us to discuss the draft annual plan. While we were pleased with the proposed rate rise outlined in the discussion document, and also the move on capital rating to increase that, we remain concerned about the implications of additional responsibilities being transferred from central government, reduced funding from NZTA, and I was discussing with one councillor, I remember when if you had flooding, you got nearly 90% of costs back. Well, I know that it doesn't always conspire today. So in the way we're getting these events, that's something to consider. Also, looking at that budget, we're concerned about the expected increase in the cost of living as a result of the ongoing Iran war and the subsequent rises in fuel prices. These factors may necessitate some challenging decisions for the council to make in the future, particularly when I look at the reduced rates rise. Footpath improvements, this was a major concern that we discussed fully, and we engaged in extensive discussions regarding potential improvements to footpaths. And quite often we veered thinking of all the lovely things we'd like to have, like seating and bike paths, but Ultimately, we agreed to support the additional funding for footpaths, prioritising enhancements that would enable seniors to walk and use mobility scooters safely on our footpaths and at entrances and exits at road crossings. For seniors, if they have a fall, it can be life-changing. They go from being active participants in a community to requiring a lot of health money. So I've just, up there, we've got several pictures that I took just before I came. So could we just slide through them just one at a time? You've got them in front of you, sorry. Now, I took these footpaths on these pictures on a well-walked footpath that is essential to the footpaths of the district. So I'll let you know it was in Ditma Drive. Looking at those footpaths, they look really quite good, but when you actually walk, and there's one particular place that's really bad. So that's why we want a bit of emphasis on these kinds of either repairs or maintenance. So, after careful consideration, we resolved to support option B, which allocates an additional $1 million to help reduce the current backlog of footpath upgrades to 8 years. I want to mention, thank you, the value of seniors in the community. Amidst ongoing economic challenges and rising cost pressures, seniors continue to bolster the local economy by supporting a wide range of businesses. In addition, this includes actively being employed, but also there's a lot of people in Palmerston that are employed for senior citizens. I'm thinking of rest homes, sporting venues, quite a few, doctors. Where am I up to here? In addition, they volunteer for numerous organisations offering their time and skills to strengthen community services and networks. Many seniors also assist with grandparent duties, providing vital support to families. The group appreciates the ongoing efforts to make Palmerston North a vibrant and welcoming place to live. We wish to encourage the continued backing of cultural facilities such as the Globe, Regent and Centrepoint theatres. We also support initiatives like fencing playgrounds for young children, upgrades to sporting infrastructure including walkways and places like the Lido, every bowling clubs, every sporting facility. Enhancement of the library and in particular sustained support for community groups in the suburbs. So I will now pass on to Russell, who has a lot of knowledge on what support is required in the community. Thank you, Russell.
I think there's 3 minutes here. Got my count up there.
Oh, we're running out of time, sorry.
Okay, kia ora anō. Support in the community, of course, we have talked to you before about, and you have been very positive participants in the worldwide thing of an age-friendly city, and our city is. So you are all conversant with the domains of the age-friendly cities, and those are the types of aims and objectives that will meet the need for a safe and enjoyable life for seniors within our city. A couple of bits I just want to touch on, though. First of all, in housing, I just want to expand a little bit there. We would like to say that it's appreciated that the Palmerston North City Council has a positive attitude and a positive history with social housing in particular, and we would like for that to be still front of mind going forward. In particular, though, we would like for the social housing component of a prioritisation for seniors housing, where there are quite often requirements that are specific for the enjoyment and the life of older people, such as egress to and from the housing, to and from the sections, such as parking and storage facilities for either vehicles or mobility scooters, etc., such as doors that are a little wider that will take walking frames and will take wheelchairs, such as bathrooms that are accessible. And I just want to use that word and to finish off with housing in particular, and probably the whole gist of our whole kaupapa is the word accessibility, and I think you heard me talk about that this morning, so I won't go any further on that. The other bit I want to talk about very quickly, I realise the time, is about the age-friendly city. Joan has mentioned that the reference group totally supports the concept of Palmerston North accreditation of being an age-friendly city. So we are calling upon the council and the budget to continue with that total support in the means of providing the resourcing, which is human resources, fiscal resources, and other resources that are required materialistically. So we call upon that to continue, and we appreciate the total support for that concept and the pride that we have of calling our city in that title. And I think that's just about to end the time.
We do have a question for you if you'd like to answer that.
Oh, I don't know whether I'd like to, but
I'll
try.
Yeah. Councillor Wood, if I just push the right button. There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Joan and Russell. I won't go hard on you. Just one question is, a common theme through submissions is people on fixed income struggling with rate increases, and obviously those in our senior community are more likely to be on a fixed income with the pension. Does the group have a particular view on what you deem affordability to be, or is it very much on a case-by-case basis?
I think the first thing is that we would support you as a council lobbying with the regional council to lobby with government around the uplifting and the upgrading of the rates rebate system. I know it's been updated a few times over a few years, but I really doubt that that's kept up with the cost of living. I really doubt that it's kept up with rates rises. I know it's not in your budget, but you are the ones who can lobby regional government, because I believe the deal is between central government and regional government passed, and you have to do the mahi. So really that's one thing that I think would help in that.
Sorry, we're all out of time there, so we'll
really appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Sport Manawatu, and we have got Carl, and I think we've got Kelly as well.
Kia ora, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Firstly, I want to acknowledge and thank Palmerston North City Council for your continued support and investment into play, recreation and sport. I also want to acknowledge the large number of sporting community groups, older adult groups who have just spoken, lovely, and School Principals Association who acknowledge the value and importance of sport and physical activity through this process. We recognise and acknowledge the fiscal constraints that you face in this difficult budget. When councils are forced to make difficult budget choices, investment in play and active recreation and sport is one of the smartest decisions that you will make. It's a low-cost, high-impact investment that delivers a proven social return of investment of $2.12 for every dollar invested, while directly supporting the outcomes council is accountable for: population well-being, affordability, livability, and long-term demand reduction on health and social services. Protecting affordable, local, everyday opportunities to be active is therefore not discretionary spend, but prudent, preventative investment and sound stewardship of public funds. It is important to note that Sports Event Partnership Fund has generated more than $10 million of economic benefit to the city and reinforced Palmerston North's position as the central hub for sport and recreation and a place where people want to live, visit, raise their family and invest in, so we need to protect this. We are here today to build on some of the key points raised in our written submission, reinforcing a few areas that most directly drive everyday participation. That includes access to free and low-cost activities. That's imperative, particularly in the current cost of living context. So parks, reserves, playgrounds, walkways, and cycleways that enable everyday movement should be maintained as core community infrastructure. So we support the Council in its recommendation to preserve and maintain these assets, including changing rooms on sports fields. We support and encourage partnerships with other facilities such as Massey University and Manfield. Additionally, as members of the Ora Connect Collective Impact Initiative, we are committed to supporting the actions of the He Au Taumomo He Iwi Tonui, which places whānau aspirations for the 4412 community front and centre. We are supportive of Farnham Park redevelopment with its specific focus on inclusive play for neurodiverse tamariki and rangatahi, as it provides a safe and accessible option on the 4412 side of the community. Community sport in Palmerston North is predominantly delivered by volunteers. While not explicitly referenced in the annual budget, we want to highlight the real impact of any increase in user charges for arena or other council-owned facilities. Rising facility hire and ground costs place direct pressure on clubs and inevitably on families, creating barriers for participation. We do want to acknowledge and commend Council's decision to retain free swimming for under 5s with a caregiver, supporting water play activity and water safety. In regards to arena, we support the continued development of the Arena Master Plan. The working group has consistently identified a clear shortage of indoor court space. Demand is already under pressure, and without additional court space, more tamariki and rangatahi will miss out on participation. Rising fuel costs and increasing adverse weather conditions are already seeing a shift in sport to indoors, placing further strain on existing facilities. And without investment, this pressure will continue to grow. We also put at risk national level secondary school sports events for the future, as they are already at capacity and require more indoor space. While there may be some views that other facilities could be used, such as gyms, school gyms, it could be used instead of arena. It's important to apply a practical lens from both a participant and sport perspective. As the Sport and Recreation Committee heard last week, Palmerston North secondary schools, 10 of them, sit above the national average for boys and girls' participation in sport. This is something we want to strengthen and protect. In practical terms, take basketball, for example. 14 league teams alone come from Fielding High School. They travel to arena each week during the season using 1 or 2 buses and a small number of staff. All games are played at one central venue, allowing multiple games to run concurrently, teams to support each other, and a strong competition environment to be maintained. Basketball is already operating at capacity alongside badminton and volleyball, and are eagerly awaiting the addition of additional capacity that Arena 5 will provide. How would multiple venues work? Dispersing 14 teams just from one school across multiple venues would significantly increase transport costs and staffing costs, and would inevitably reduce participation. Importantly, sporting tournaments require specific venue needs. Court markings, court size, lighting, ceiling heights, and floor quality, and the list goes on. A centralised hub like Arena creates energy, vibrancy, and connection. Bringing teams together in one place creates healthy competition, social connection, and a strong culture. Community sport is more than just physical activity. It supports rangatahi mental health, it builds pro-social behaviours, it strengthens resilience, and research consistently shows it contributes to positive educational outcomes as well as physical well-being. So, in conclusion, what a great investment play, recreation and sport is. And let's not forget, it benefits our hapu mamas through to our older adults. So our key things are keep access to facilities and sport affordable, and keep the basics strong. Renewals, maintenance, footpaths, cycleways and facilities. Sportman 2 would like to thank the Palmerston North City Council for its continued partnership. We welcome the opportunity to work with Palmerston North City Council and partners on practical solutions that improve affordability, protect participation and strengthen a thriving, inclusive sport, play and active recreation system to keep Palmerston North healthy and well and one of the best places to live. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First up in the question line, we have got Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Kelly and Carl. Low cost is a term that gets thrown around a bit. Does Sport Manawatu have any tools available to help quantify what low cost actually means in a dollars and cents term?
That's a really interesting question. And I would say low cost is different to different people. So free is best, obviously. And for some whānau, that is where they're at. And there is, I wouldn't say there is a number in regards to what low cost is. It's a good question. And it's different for different sports.
Thanks. And secondly, briefly, we had a submission this morning from E&M, and they pointed out the essential reliance on volunteers for delivery of their mahi in the same way that you pointed out for yours. They then went to calculate kind of a dollar value estimate against that. Has there been an effort ever for Sport Manawatu to quantify the hours of volunteer effort in Palmerston North and then convert that into a dollars kind of estimate?
No would be the simple answer to that, but it's a very interesting question.
Thank you. Chair.
Next up, we have got Councillor Zabellin.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Tēnā kōrua. You mentioned the competition for indoor court space, and we'd heard earlier today about the frustration experienced with bookings being chopped and changed to fit around other events. I just wondered, have you heard about this from your member codes and how widespread that problem might be?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the challenges that comes with that is, which I fully empathise with, is that in order to have arena, it needs to be balanced with commercial as well as community sport. And so therefore, where there are opportunities in regards to have commercial opportunities to get bigger revenue in, then it is important that there is a balance. Unfortunately, sometimes it does mean that community sport leagues can get changed around. Does that answer?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
And now we've got Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, team, for coming in today. Just wanted to ask regarding the fees and charges, because I've noted that you've met, it's a barrier for a lot of families on low income. I just want to get from your perspective, what you reckon or what you think are, given that costs are always rising, the maintenance costs of fields to council or maintaining field, how do you envisage us sort of addressing, or should I say, address that need?
Yeah, good question there, Councillor. It's one of those challenges that it's a matter of just keeping it affordable and keeping it practical, I think, not drastic increases. I know cost of parks and reserves is significant, but spreading that across all aspects of those parks and reserves costs would be recommended from our end. Particular codes are more expensive than others, so it's just harmonising that across. I would suggest that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Dennison, we don't have time for you for the question. So that brings the end of your presentation, so thank you. That brings us up to Manawatu Rugby League, and we've got Lawrence Benjamin. Yeah, and so, sorry, Lawrence, you've got someone with you. Didn't have the names. Forgive me for not being able to introduce you. Yeah. Oh, sorry, if you just push the right-hand button on each of those. Yeah, that's the one.
Can you hear me now?
Welcome.
Sorry, this is our chairman, Samuel Maniopoto. Tēnā tātou e te whānau, ko Lawrence Eri he tōku ingoa. I'm the general manager for Manawatu Rugby League, and my cohort on my left is Samuel Maniopoto, who's our chairman. Thank you very much for taking the time out to listen to our submission, and then we'll look forward to Q&A after we're completed. But I'll hand over to Sam and he can spiel off, and then I'll answer any questions, or we'll answer any questions that are directed to us. Thank you.
Tēnā tātou. Probably start off with dovetailing into sports Manawatu. No, they are our overarching, one of our overarching bodies, especially within our local district. We thought we needed to put the submission in support of them, as well as push our own agenda across. So, who are we as Manawatu Rugby League? We have just under 2,000 registered players, coaches, volunteers, aging from 6 years old to our senior players up to 30, 40 years old. Wrapped around that 2,000 is another 2,000 to 4,000 people that support our tamariki. Over the last couple of years, we've become a victim of our own success. We've got 78 junior teams, junior rangatahi teams. They play on Coronation Park on a Sunday all day. And we've had to get very inventive on how we're going to fit all our kids and all our games into one day. It's not easy, but we're still managing. At the moment, we have been allocated Coronation Park for years. It suited our needs. But as I said, we've become a victim of our own success. We're getting too big, too fast. And we are very quickly running out of options. Therefore, continued support in parks and grounds around our region, ensuring that our tamariki and our rangatahi have got somewhere safe to play, someone that's facilities that are fit for purpose. Along those lines, a lot of parks, Coronation Park has two changing rooms. We have something like 14 kōrero team. So if you can work that out, that is very, very congested. So yes, we want continued support for our sports and recreation grounds. We've heard it, I'm sure you've heard it many times today, the cost of living, it is hitting us. It is hitting us hard. If you don't know, our rugby league whānau extends from Dannyvik to the east, Whititira or Otaki to the west, Whanganui as far north as Ruapehu, and to the south, our southern boundary is Masterton. So for us, we want to be able to provide world-class facilities for our people to play in. And we're not, and I'm talking across the board, not just our kids and thing. We have had some issues previously, but we have no choice but to keep pushing and keep striving to make sure that we're providing the best facilities and the best opportunities for our community we can. But I think that's pretty much it.
Great, we have a few questions for you, so we can start up with Mr. Mayor.
Yep. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Look, thanks, Lawrence and Sam, and appreciate everything you're doing in a volunteer role for League. Obviously, with Coronation Park being your home, and you're just sort of obviously saying to us, the space, the grounds, the changing facilities are really challenging for you. Is there a master plan for, or strategic sort of thinking about what that might look like, next season, the season after that, where you might need another ground or two, and obviously the changing facilities is a bit tougher, but is that sort of been undertaken or thought about?
Well, at the moment with the current grounds itself, we didn't envision being so big in a short period of time. We've been involved since 2016 to now. So with the increase of teams, and not just in the tama space, but in the kōtiro space, I'm always working in the background to try and come up with a different plan around the layout of the park and how it accommodates not just rugby league, but also rugby. Touch, we've done a partnership with Touch in regards to that space as well.
Yep.
We've looked at other opportunities or alternative venues, such as just recent discussions with the Parks and Reserves team around Ashurst out there. Also in talks with Kyoto Rugby around Bill Brown Park, etc., etc. So
Okay.
we've touched base with various other organisations within the space due to the being involved with rugby and all other codes as well. But at this present time, we're focused on Coronation Park because it provides the necessary field layout, just not the facility side of things in regards to our female participants in the game.
Okay, all right. So there is sort of some thinking around number 2 parks, perhaps some relationships with
definitely.
Kia Tawa coming to see us, I think, tomorrow. So yeah. Okay, thank you.
Next up, we'll move to the Deputy Mayor.
Tēnā koe, Mr Chair. O tira tēnā kōrua I tai mai o tēnei kaupapa whakahirahira, tēnā kōrua. Have you identified what the projected growth in the sport will be over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, we do have a strategic plan set in place. We try and do that every 2 to 3 years to increase it to our 5-year strategic plan. It's getting bigger and bigger. That's the issue. We can't forecast any numbers until, because like we said, we've just increased Shannon Rugby coming into the rugby league program. Te Kaua Rugby put in an expression of interest to be involved at the junior level as well. From 2016, we increased from 4 clubs to 13 clubs, and as Sam said, coming from Wairarapa across to Otaki, all the way up through to Wanganui, Ruapehu, and back down to Fielding, etc. So,
the growth is impressive. I was just wondering also, have you observed a trend that there are more younger people coming in, like the school teams? You mentioned Hatapara, Manukura and so forth, and the girls, of course. Or is it more adult teams, or is it across the board, the growth?
Oh, it's more of our tamariki teina rangatahi teams that are interested in, because of the set pathway that it set at the start of the year. It doesn't conflict too much into the other codes through the winter season, and that's the same with the senior program. It's also done after the rugby season as well, later on in July, etc. So we've already had 4 other senior clubs from around the Rohe expressed interest of being involved, from Kapiti through to Wanganui again, and a few others. So there is interest, but as we always say to them, turn up to a meeting and put your tono through to be involved. If not, stay silent, pretty much.
Tēnā kōrua, and well done on your success. Kia ora.
Thank you. With about 15 seconds to go, I think we might have to leave it there. Thank you very much. Big NRL fan myself, but for very obvious physique reasons, I limit that to watching it. Right, next up, we have got the Cancer Society of Manawatu. We've got Josephine Guthrie.
Guthrie. Kia ora. My name is Josephine Guthrie. I am a health promoter for the Manawatu Cancer Society. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My submission focuses on the vital role Palmerston North Council plays in community wellbeing and development, creating a healthy, safe and inclusive environment for the community to thrive. I want to start by commending the Council for their dedication to supporting the community's health and wellbeing by providing budget allocation towards protecting health resources, such as shade development and active play spaces. Many people that we talk to at local events and health expos are supportive and even passionate about wanting stronger action towards health initiatives. Smoke-free and vape-free environments and adequate shade are hot topics of discussion amongst the community. Our active environment has a huge influence on the health of the community. When council invests in these assets, they create physically engaging spaces that support community to live healthy lifestyles. Evidence strongly shows that features of the built environment, such as accessible footpaths, adequate shade, safe and inviting play structures, and access to drinking water, play a meaningful role in shaping how much physical activity people engage in, as well as how much time is actually spent engaging with these assets. A meaningful return on investment depends on people actively using these community assets. To make that possible, we first need a firm commitment to maintaining them and dedicating sufficient resources to ensuring these projects are delivered to a high standard. We recognise the challenges of the current economic climate and understand how this influences decision-making within council. The financial pressure facing our communities are front of mind, as we see firsthand how rising costs are affecting our clients and in many cases limiting their ability to access essential healthcare. So when contributing to our recommendations, we understand that not everything can be achieved in one budget cycle. We must still advocate for better health outcomes for our community though, because scientific research shows that addressing social determinants of health at the local level, such as housing, food security, access to physical activity and transportation, helps lower overall healthcare costs by reducing reliance on expensive acute care, preventing chronic disease and supporting earlier intervention. We acknowledge that public health is not a core responsibility of local councils, yet we also recognise that the significant impact council investment and involvement can have in improving the health and well-being of communities across Aotearoa. That is why we strongly encourage council to continue supporting these initiatives while refining and adjusting financial assistance when and where appropriate. We are not asking for millions or thousands of additional dollars. What we are seeking is council's commitment to sustaining its role in these essential areas of public health support. Because we can make sure the people that we love do not have to get their lives cut short by cancer, by building on these cancer prevention strategies and policies. While you may not be health professionals or on the front lines witnessing the rising cases of cancer and other communicable diseases entering our hospitals each day, your decisions still have a meaningful impact on those numbers. By maintaining your commitment to prevention efforts and advocacy around the social determinants of health, you can help shape healthier outcomes for our community, which actually highlights an important movement of advocacy that's happening right now. The central government has put forward the Sale and Supply Amendment Bill for alcohol, which has multiple changes that would negatively affect the health and well-being of communities, as well as how you as local council can protect and support your own community. 76% of people want stronger limits on places that can sell alcohol. The alcohol industry uses all the power and the money and influence it has to convince decision makers they need to make it easier for them to sell alcohol in our communities, near schools and where we buy food. It's a David versus Goliath situation. People in politics can reduce the influence of alcohol industry on politicians by changing the rules about their access to the politicians. We can demand of decision makers that communities, health researchers, and alcohol harm reduction agencies who are there to protect our young people and communities meet with the Ministry of Health more often than the members of the alcohol industry do. Decision makers, including you as local councillors, need to make it easier for communities to keep alcohol outlets out of our neighbourhoods, because we know that reducing the consumption and availability of alcohol reduces the incidence of alcohol attributable cancer. Other councils are doing their part in advocating for their communities. So my question to you is, will you do the same?
Thank you. Councillor Naylor. Helps if I push the button.
Thanks for your submission. Just particularly the last part where you're asking us to consider stronger limits around alcohol. Would you consider councils should have a position in terms of supplying alcohol at events to our community?
That's an interesting one. Yeah, I definitely think there should be more stronger limits around that, because as a council you should be you should be advocating for the health of your communities, and by doing that be a representation of what you are advocating for. So having policies in place within your own council is important in that action as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Josephine, for your submission. Just following on from that, so you said all the other councils are doing it. Can you name them?
Yep. Well, I didn't say all, I said some. Wanganui Council is going to be putting a submission forward, and I know that Auckland Council was also going to, and those are the ones I know.
Just
about.
our neighbours.
Oh, Wanganui.
No, our neighbours. So is MDC doing it? Is TDC doing it?
I haven't
Is
talked to them
HDC?
quite yet, but I would encourage them to do so as well.
So they're not doing it at the moment, but...
I'm not too sure.
Okay, all right. And secondly, around events, which Councillor Naylor spoke about, so if we were to have let's say a civic honours event, where we're acknowledging people from the community and older people as well, you're saying that we shouldn't provide any alcohol at that event?
Our position is low or no, always, because we know that any amount of alcohol can contribute to cancer, and the more that you have, obviously, it increases your risk. And we also believe that you can have an event without alcohol. We've come to a culture where we have associated events and celebration with alcohol, and we need to break that culture because you can still have fun without alcohol.
Including an event with a whole lot of older people in their 60s and 70s.
Just because they're older doesn't mean their life has ended, so I'd like to extend their life by not increasing their alcohol intake.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm just wondering who the politician is here. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Josephine. Interested in a couple areas. I guess one is I will ask based on the korero so far. There's quite a bit of information about younger generations being much less interested in consuming alcohol than has been historically the trend. Can you share any kind of insight into why that might be and kind of how that could affect public health in this community over time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that our younger generation is much more informed, and they are much more aware of what the alcohol industry is actually targeting them for. And so we're seeing a lot of marketing techniques trying to get this younger generation on, where the alcohol industry is doing a lot of targeted marketing with like fun and hip new flavours and things. But I think our rangatahi, they're just a much more switched on, and they're much more aware of the harms, and they're doing a lot more advocacy in their own spaces. And so that could attribute to it. There's a lot more knowledge around the harms than there was, just like we saw with smoking. You know, when smoking first came out in cigarettes, we were like, oh yeah, this is great, it helps us lose weight and it suppresses our appetite. And then we started to see the harms, and obviously we started to see a lot more people take notice of that and not pick up smoking. So we're hopefully seeing that same pathway happening, but we need the same kind of regulation around alcohol because it's a carcinogen, class 1, just like tobacco. So why don't we have the same restrictions around it?
Great, thank you. Moving to a slightly different topic, does the Cancer Society hold any information on the relationship between long-term exposure to petrol fumes and the incidence of cancer?
No, I'm not aware of any at this moment. I could look into it with National Office, but we have our 5 priority areas, which is alcohol, tobacco, screening, nutrition and physical activity, and a mixed one. That's 5.
That's all right.
And so like those are where we kind of focus on, but there are other researches that's going on, but I'm not sure of it right now.
Great, thank you. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Just a quick question from me. Does your organisation have a position on the use of ratepayer funds for the purchase of alcohol for entertainment or events?
I'm not too sure at this point. Sorry.
Thank you. That brings to the end of your submission then. If you've got nothing further you want to say, because you have got a minute left.
Actually, I do have one thing. I put in a query about the budget line for the food security and resilience policy on the 8th of April, and I've yet to got a reply from council about what about that. So I was just wondering if that could be like sped up so I know the answer to it.
Someone to look into that for you. Yep.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, so next up we have got Nuvaka Trust and we have got Aaron Freeman. Welcome, Aaron.
Kia ora tātou katoa toa. My name is Aaron. I am the Business Sustainability Leader at New Vaka Trust. I'd just like to extend our organisation's thanks for having us participate today. It is important to our organisation to have a seat at the table, hold robust conversations and advocate for our Pacifica community. I'd just like to start off with our submission content, which hopefully you've seen, but I just want to touch on a few extra areas as well. New Vaka Trust's position is to advocate for more investment in the allocation of funds for strategic priority grants, sector lead and community funding for the not-for-profit sector, especially for those of us who are working with priority populations such as Pacifica and Māori. New Vaka Trust delivers crucial health and social service support for Pacifica communities, and in order to support equitable access, we require funding and investment in the areas of financial literacy and kai sovereignty particularly. With the current pool of government funding, cuts are occurring more frequently, philanthropic funding pools are reducing and are oversubscribed, making it quite challenging for organisations such as ours to better support our communities. The responsibility sits across multiple sectors, and this is one way that the Council could contribute through its annual budget deliberations with more purposeful and targeted funding for communities of interest in order to achieve greater community wellbeing. As outlined in the Mahere Tau Tawhi Hapori Community Support Plan, which also supports the achievement of Palmerston North City Council strategic goals. In addition to the above, New Vaka Trust is a partner on the Water Connect Alliance, and we wish to also support the submission for the Whānau Park Revitalisation Project. In regards to the proposed 3 options for rates increases, we don't have any particular problem with it. We'd probably support the status quo. We do acknowledge that 4.9% increase is a reduction from the original 8.5% forecast that was earlier recommended. But one thing I would like to touch on is, as part of partnering with Water Connect Alliance, we're also part of the He Ao Tō Mua He Iwi Tōnui Data Dashboard project. So we do have some hard data and stats from part of the Mana Oriti Partnership Agreement as part of the Te Tihi's data dashboard that they have, and what we do know, and I need to probably earmark that these stats are specific to the 4412 suburb only. So if we look at things of a 30k population in the 4412, 76% of those people are at a deprivation level of 6 to 10. Age 25 to 45 years, there are 3,200 people at a deprivation 9 level. And age 65 to 74 years in that region, there are 504 people still working 40 to 49 hours per week for a median annual individual income of around $39,055 per year. So taking those sorts of things into consideration, and if we're honouring whānau voice, we would think that there are other things that they are concerned with, in terms of, say, footpaths. They are nice to have, but they're probably not the first thing on those people's minds. And that's probably just something that I wanted to earmark into our submission as well. Thank you very much.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Chair. Kia ora, Aaron, and thanks for the submission. Now, on the one hand, you've asked us to put additional money into community funding, but on the other hand, you've stated that 4.9% increase in rates is already a significant increase for priority populations. So how are we going to resolve the tension between those two situations? Are you suggesting that we put less funding into something else? Are you suggesting that we prioritise some parts of the population above others? I'm just wondering how we're going to do this without putting up rates further.
Good question. What I would say to that is what we're hearing on the ground is that any sort of relief to our communities that are suffering in this cost of living crisis, as well as the sort of fuel costs as well that are associated with that, any sort of relief that they could get in terms of whether that means more equitable access to healthcare or better employment outcomes, driver's licensing training, so they actually have less barriers to employment outcomes, would naturally assist in other areas that they're experiencing economically. So I guess what we're saying is putting funding into those sorts of spaces actually helps that in the overall scheme of things. I hope that answers your question, sorry.
Yeah, so I suppose you're saying that to focus on programs that might enable people to achieve better economic outcomes for themselves, is that what you're saying? Is that a fair summary?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Do we have any further questions? No further questions? Are you anything else you want to say from your end?
No, that was all from me. Thank you very
Wonderful.
much.
Thank you for your submission. That now brings us through to Malcolm Frith.
Good afternoon, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity of speaking today to address this annual plan. History is a great teacher, but unfortunately I think a lot of us today aren't listening. An example of that was when the peasants in France were starving and they were told to eat cake by Marie Antoinette. She lost her head not long after that. Our council should start listening to the peasants, if you want to put it plainly. As the last gentleman said, 4.9 or whatever the proposed rate increase doesn't sound a lot. But then we're also facing some other major crises at the moment. So when you hear of our mayor and councillor Dennison over there taking an overseas trip, I really begin to wonder if that's the core business of a council. Yes, it's nice to have an international department to invite students here, but it's also nice to look after the people that are actually paying for all of that. There's a lot of people in the city, and as it was mentioned by previous submitters, who are on retired and are on fixed incomes. It was quite interesting just to hear the figure announced of an average income, and it's pretty low. So when you hear of having a new water entity, and we've got six-figure incomes, obviously, to pay those people. And I think, no, this is an injustice. This is not right. When people are on $25,000 a year or less, are expected to pay a $250,000 income for a board member or a chairman member of the new water entity? Or are they going to do it for free, like in the good old days? These things haven't come out to the public, but we've been sold the idea that we needed to give our water away, our water asset to be transferred out of the City Council's control and into the hands of others to entrust them with that asset. But we have to pay for that. I speak to a lot of people, and a lot of people aren't aware that we're facing around about $1,000 per year on top of our rates to pay for our fresh water in the very near future. So as I say, those people who are at the top, sitting on the board, will no doubt be paid for their time at the expense of those who are on low incomes. I didn't support initially the issue around footpaths, because I think our footpath, the method of ways that we construct our footpaths today, seriously needs looking at. The cost of bitumen, for example, is quite excessive. Cost of concrete is quite excessive. So why aren't we looking at manufacturing or encouraging a business to start developing a plastic footpath system that would be easily installed, levelled, and then if tree roots come along and interrupt with it, it can be reset. These are the kind of engineering things that other countries are already well in advance and are using. For example, another solution to our lines on the road is melted on plastic strips, which if you Google it, is what other countries do. So they're not paying for paint continuously to be applied and then worn off. There's also another thing that's developed quite strangely in this city, and that is removing perfectly good infrastructure and replacing it with another bit of infrastructure. An example of this is sections of footpaths along Pioneer Highway that were removed. There was nothing wrong with them, the shared pathway, and replaced with concrete. This was also down out at Rowe Road. And I asked myself, and then you're expecting the ratepayers, which I'm glad this item has been dropped, to fund an extension of that footpath to make the fielding connection. So why wasn't that budget that was allocated for removing the existing infrastructure and replacing it when it hadn't already exceeded its lifetime, why wasn't that applied to expanding the length of the current footpath? There's other things like failures where the beautiful rose beds have slowly but surely been removed and replaced with natives. Now, there's nothing wrong with natives. I spent 20 years planting those down the Pitt Park. But what I did realise in all those years is that some don't do well in our city. And one of those is characters and hebes when they're exposed to the extreme weather of Palmerston North. Yet, those at powers that be decided that's a good thing to do, rip out the roses, which had done us very well. When I inquired about this, I was told they were old and prickly, so they had to go. So watch out for all the retirees. There's another area which I didn't support, and that was the current bus stops we're seeing installed. Again, removing good infrastructure just based on ideology. This was evident up in Roberts Line. There was a perfectly good bus shelter there. It was removed to have not but one replace it, but 4. Imagine that, all those people that stand there every day waiting for the bus. I think we have a real problem with our bus system, not the fact we've electrified it, but the routes that the buses take are problematic. They don't collect the people. We've had bus stops removed just recently, and lo and behold, I found out where they were deposited. Down on an unsecured site, down at the end of Maxwell's Road, Tip Road they were actually on. There was at least 10 or 12 of them just left there discarded, but they hadn't exceeded their expected lifetime. So why are we removing them at this stage when we have unsecured bus system in place right now? So, as a suggestion made by one of the councillors, what would you like to see removed instead, or to bring in extra money? My suggestion would be to sell the Arpuni site that the council bought, and no doubt we're paying an expensive amount of interest on that borrowings to purchase that church site a mere year or so ago. So if you want to sell something, sell that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Malcolm. In your submission, you said you do not support a rates increase based on the statement on page 8,
Yes.
which is the 4.9% increase. Do you have a view of what level of increase would be an acceptable level?
None, to be quite honest, because every year, now if you look back through annual plans, there was a period where they actually focused on that we wouldn't have an increase. That never happened. There were a couple of periods that they had promised with quite high increases that after year 3 or 4 there actually would be a 0 increase.
Okay, and so if to achieve a 0 increase there would have to be a reduction in levels of service, would you feel that it was worth having a reduction of level of service to achieve a 0% rates increase?
When you say level of service, when you have projects proposed on a clay cliffed hill, which is historically unstable, so there's a budget was already set up and money has been spent on that. And I'm glad that project's been put on hold because it's a crazy idea. It's a crazy amount of money to propose to spend on such a short bit of roadway, filling in a natural valley, drainage, etc., just to achieve access to that site. That's where the money is being wasted on a lot of planning. There's a lot of money goes out of the city just in planning with consultants and other people involved in that process. So don't cut the level of service, cut some of those project plannings before they even get off the ground.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Any further questions? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That brings us to our final submitter, Richard Walker.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Kia ora, Mayor and Councillors. My name is Richard Walker and I live here in Palmerston North. First, I want to acknowledge the work gone into this budget and bringing the proposed rates increases down to 4.9%. In the current environment, that is no small task. However, given how I'm dressed before you today and how many of you know what I do for a living and how much time I spend in the less glamorous parts of our city's infrastructure, you can probably imagine what my submission entails. Because it's the infrastructure that I want to talk about, because that infrastructure is the bedrock for a stable, resilient and thriving city. And I believe that this budget represents a moment of choice for this council, a point where we need to be very clear about what we prioritise and why. From my background in water infrastructure, I've learned that infrastructure rarely fails at once. It wears down quietly over time until one day it doesn't just need attention, it demands it. And by that point, the cost is no longer manageable and it is unavoidable. That is why I see the maintenance not just as a line item, but as a responsibility. It is a responsibility to every person, every animal, and every taonga within this city. Because when we underinvest in maintenance, we are not saving money. A small repair becomes a full replacement, a planned upgrade becomes an emergency response, and a manageable cost becomes something far more disruptive, both financially and for the people who rely on those services every day. We end up simply passing on a larger, more difficult burden to our future generations. I want to acknowledge that this budget does begin to move in the right direction, with a clear focus on core infrastructure, particularly across the three waters and our transport, and that is very encouraging. But I would also respectfully suggest that we need to go a little bit further and be more deliberate with how we approach this. We should be prioritising our renewals over new expansion. Our maintenance budgets need to reflect the true condition of our assets and the long terms, and we should conduct long-term stewardship rather than just short-term deferrals. Because at its heart, it is about trust. The ratepayers trust you to look after these assets and keep this city functioning, something we do quite well. And the most responsible way we can honour that trust is by maintaining what we already have properly and consistently, because that is how we avoid shocks and that is how we keep costs predictable. And that is how we ensure that the systems that we rely on continue to serve us well into the future. And there is a simple truth in my line of work, and that is there is nothing more expensive than deferred maintenance. And that principle applies as much at ground level, quite literally, with our footpaths, which is why I strongly support option 3 for our footpath renewals. But I would encourage us to view this as more than just maintenance alone. This is an investment in how people move through our city. It is an investment into active transport whose benefits outweigh far more than just the dollars and cents. If we want fewer cars in the central city, less congestion, a safer, more accessible streets, then walking needs to be a real, viable option. Which is why I believe, At present, a significant portion of our footpath network is in poor condition, and under current funding levels, it would take well over a decade to address the backlog. That does not encourage people to walk, it discourages them. When footpaths are safe, connected and well maintained, children can walk to school, the elderly feel more connected, and our city becomes more accessible for everyone. The additional cost to households is modest and the return is significant, because it is not just about fixing concrete, it is about improving safety, accessibility and transport choice in a way that is both practical and cost effective. And if we are serious about reducing pressure on our roads, then one of the most simplest and affordable places to start is the footpath outside our front gates. When fuel prices are astronomical, it should serve as a wake-up call to our council to start prioritising active transport and move away from the roadway and towards the shared pathway. Because if we don't, our citizens, our planet, and our balance sheet will suffer. Which brings me on to our environmental and resilience-focused investment, because I think it's important that we frame this correctly. These are not optional extras, these are not nice-to-haves. They are critical infrastructure investments, and we are already seeing across New Zealand the more frequent and more severe weather events. Flooding, storm damage, infrastructure under pressure. This is no longer a future risk. This is a reality right now. And when our systems are not prepared for that reality, the consequences are significant, both financially and for the communities affected. Which is why I believe we need to refocus our investments into our stormwater capacity and nature-based solutions, urban tree planting and green infrastructure, and energy efficiency through local generation and urban solar panels. Because these programs at their core are about reducing risk. They reduce the likelihood of damage, they reduce the cost of recovery, and they reduce long-term pressure on ratepayers. If we choose not to invest now, we do not avoid these costs, we simply face them later in a more urgent and more expensive form. This is not environmental spending, this is resilience, this is risk management, and this is about protecting our city. We are not preparing for something that might happen, we are responding to something that is already happening. And if we take the right steps now, when our day of deluge comes, we will not be saying how unprepared we were, we will be saying how lucky we are. Ngā mihi nui ki a kātou, mō tā kātou wā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Thank you. We have a question from Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Richard. Just wanted to go back to one of the earlier points you raised in your submission there around, if I heard it right, asset management plans reflecting the true condition of assets.
Yep.
Can I ask what's behind that comment in terms of your observations or experience?
Quite often, the person that's conducting those, assessments of the assets as they go through are not necessarily the person that sees it every day. They are not the operators, effectively, at all times. Sometimes those are outside consultants, sometimes those are not. And there's a lot of stuff under the ground that just doesn't want to get checked because, it's quite difficult to get to. It's not particularly nice to do. An example would be, for example, College Street pump station that's been upgraded recently. And I believe those storage tanks were there from, I'm pretty sure, more than 100 years. And they're still using the same concrete tanks themselves. Not that they're not used, but that is, a symptom of a larger network underneath the ground.
So is your primary fix that council should be proactively soliciting asset information from contractors and other
outside of normal sources, so not just going through, asking as many people that have had their eyes and hands on those assets as possible, especially when you're, pulling things out of the ground. You don't necessarily, sometimes, assessment of those assets when those were put into the ground isn't always there. It's a lot better now. You can, there's maps and things like that can go, but a lot of times we're pulling things out of the ground we didn't know.
Great, thanks, Chair.
And a question from Councillor Zabellin.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Richard. I just had a quick question. In your submission, you said that we should be doing less of new facilities that increase long-term operating costs unless there is a strong demonstrated need. And I just wondered if you had a view as to what a strong demonstrated need looks like. How is that case made?
Obviously it's a case-by-case basis, and that's for the council to decide. But I think if we can maintain a facility and a renewal of that facility, if you look at the overall cost of some things, I think a lot better, or a lot more, it would be a lot better if we could, sort of, I suppose, maintain our facilities more than just buying the newest, shiniest thing, especially when we have largely, well, good functioning assets as we are, and we need to continue investing in those things and maintain those as we go, rather than letting the maintenance slip on a lot of our assets, and then in 20 years' time realise, okay, the damage is too far gone, we now need to completely replace this.
Sure. Thank you, that's helpful. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Richard.
Sweet.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of the session, and we will have a closing karakia from Councillor Zabellin.
Kia ora, ko te muturanga o te rā. It's the end of the day, but not the end of the meeting, so we'll have a karakia. Kia puta ki te whāau, ki te ao marama, whakamaua ki a tīna. Haumie huie, tāi kie, kia ora.
Thank you. So, yes, the meeting is now adjourned, not closed, until